transported. I'm hoping that we missed that, because if there were no ambulances to carry the officers away, that would be a very ominous sign.
So we're just basically awaiting more information right now.
Okay, we're told that the officers responding to this scene were Eastside officers, and one of them, at least one of them, was in the anti-gang task force. He was a gang police officer addressing gang problems, which is one of the big problems that Houston faces, as we heard in the news conference from the police chief and the mayor just about 5 or 6 minutes ago. So they may have been responding to something relating to gangs. We have information from the hospital? Yes,
we understand that they have been taken to Bentop Hospital and Memorial Hermann, two of the area's best trauma centers, so that would make sense.
That's right. They're level 1 trauma centers that are equipped to handle this kind of situation. And we're just seeing, Lauren, another ambulance arrive here at the scene. I'm not quite sure why, but they are pulling equipment out here at this scene.
Do we know if all three, I'm asking my producer here, do we know if all 3 police officers have been taken to the hospital?
Okay, the last tweet we received from HPD says that all 3 officers who were shot are en route to the hospital. As to who is going to be treated here, who else might have been injured or wounded in this shooting situation, we don't know. Hopefully our helicopter will be able to zoom in a little bit closer so we can take a look. Again, this is the 7800 block of Harding.
It's possible that could have been the suspect there, because the mayor did tweet out earlier that he was down, which is kind of vague. We don't really know what down means, but so it's possible that that could have been the suspect or a suspect in this situation. So
at least 3 HPD officers responded to a scene. One of them was a member of the gang task force in the Houston Police Department, responding to this scene. When they arrived there was a shootout, apparently, and 3 officers were shot. We don't know how many officers were there. It may have been more, but the shooter was also shot. So he is down, perhaps, as Lauren suggested, possibly in the ambulance that we're seeing there. We don't know for sure. And more officers responding to the scene, the police chief asking that we keep them in our prayers. And it looks like that the main prayer effort is going to be for the officers headed now to Bentop and Hermann Hospital.
Right. We know that they were taken to those level 1 trauma centers. We don't know the conditions of the officers. We do know that they were East Side officers. At least one of them was in the gang task force department. So that could give us possibly some insight into what happened or what this was a result of, but certainly we're trying to wait and get more information on that. This is a residential area. We don't know if other people or other homes were affected by this. We saw at least one person being loaded into an ambulance just seconds ago, and so we're still trying to figure out all that information.
What we can tell, Lauren and I, from what we're looking at here, is that this is a very fresh crime scene, because you still see traffic going by there. You don't see anything cordoned off there.
That will change, yes.
Yeah, this happened very, very recently. Now, when the police chief tweeted this information out, what, about 10, 12 minutes ago?
Yes, yes.
So 14 minutes ago is when the tweet came in from the police chief saying that, quote, several officers have been shot. So he apparently tweeted that almost immediately when he got it. So this all happened during this newscast, sometime within the past 20 or 25 minutes or so.
And right here in the 5 o'clock rush hour, it may be difficult for the other crews, the other ambulances, the other officers to get there to the scene. Not
to mention our reporters who are on their way right now.
Right. We're still waiting on them to get there so that we can get some people there on the ground and get more information.
This is very important reporting that will be done on the ground, because right now we have no idea of what caused this to happen, what the initial call was, why these officers were responding to this scene.
And again, we know that at least one of them was from the gang task force. We don't know if possibly this could be a result of some sort of gang issue. We just don't know at this point. We did hear Art Acevedo, Chief Art Acevedo, talking a little bit earlier in a press conference where he was talking about the number of homicides this year. I think it was in the 270 range-ish, and talking about that just over 100 of them were either domestic violence or gang-related.
Gang-related, yes.
And so we know that factors into a lot of homicides here in the area. If you look at percentage-wise, it certainly seems to be a significant percentage. So we know that HPD is cracking down on this right now, and we'll have to wait and see if this played into today's shootings or not.
City of Houston does have, unfortunately, a large and growing gang problem. It has been the focus of the Houston Police Department, the Sheriff's Department, the constables, all law enforcement here in the area for several years now. These gangs create much of the crime that we see here in terms of robberies, burglaries, and drug-related crimes.
It looks like this is a very large crime scene. There are police officers for blocks now, it appears.
Yes, the crime scene is being set now. They'll establish a boundary and close off traffic to the area where the shooting happens so that they can conduct an investigation. It will take several hours, well into the night, when crime scene investigators arrive here to figure out exactly what happened here, where the shots were fired, how many shots were fired, who fired them. They'll be bringing in lights soon because we're going to be dark here. What, Frank, in about 30 minutes or less?
About 30 minutes, yeah.
Yeah. So they'll be bringing in lights, and this crime scene will be active into the night. Our reporters, as we've said, are on the way. This, in good traffic, would be about 20 to 25 minutes away from where we are here, but it may take a little bit longer for them to get there. We just don't want to leave until we find out. We don't want to leave air here until we get more information. Go ahead. We're listening to information from our producer. Okay, now we just got information from the Houston Police Officer Union president who was correcting the number. He's saying that 5 police officers have been shot. One of them was life-flighted to Herman Hospital. I'm assuming that's where he went because that's where life flight originates, Herman Hospital. Okay. So now 5 officers shot. We don't know their conditions, but we know that the one who was life-flighted is in very serious condition.
And we see still some ambulances there on the scene, so they may just be remaining there. We also still are seeing some officers in tactical gear. We're understanding now, Lauren, that the officers who have responded to who initially were involved in this were serving a warrant. Okay.
At an address here in the 7800 block of Harding Street. They were serving a warrant, obviously an arrest warrant for somebody they believed to be in that house, and when they pulled up to the house, they were engaged with gunfire.
And 5 officers were shot, and that must have been a significant warrant that they were serving for that many officers to have been on the scene, correct?
Yes, and another thing you can conclude is that the person or persons who were being served these warrants did not want to be arrested.
Clearly.
They were willing to fire on police officers to try and escape this situation.
And again, according to what the mayor tweeted earlier, that the suspect, the shooter in this, was down. So assuming there was just one shooter at this point.
Well, it's possible that if there were other people, the others were arrested and weren't shot, but the person who was doing some or most of the shooting was himself shot. We don't know what that person's condition is right now. Looking at this area, this is a mixed residential area, as you see in many parts of Houston where you have industrial and residential in the same area. Our lack of zoning provides for the kind of scene you're looking at here. But this is a hardscrabble neighborhood of Southeast Houston, apparently, where a gang had set in one of these houses. And as these officers approached the house to serve a warrant or warrants, there were at least 3 officers, and now we're learning probably more. They were taken under fire by whoever was in that house. And, you know, judging by the fact that 5 police officers were wounded in this, I'm gonna say that if it was one shooter, the shooter had a semi-automatic rifle, because it provides for the kind of accuracy that would be needed to wound that many officers that quickly, and also the firepower, the ability to fire that many rounds that accurately.
And we see live flight landing right now. We, again, just got some new information just a few minutes ago that indeed one officer was needing to be live flighted and that 4 others were taken to either Ben Taub or Memorial Hermann. So presumably the officer who needs to be live flighted is about to be put on this aircraft there.
That would indicate that there's at least one other serious injury here in the neighborhood, so serious that they don't want to load this person in an ambulance and fight traffic to get them to one of our trauma centers. So these life flight helicopters come equipped with a doctor, a nurse, a pilot who is very familiar with all the work required of them. They have telemetry on the hospital so they can treat the patient on the way to the hospital. There you see a second life flight helicopter on or near the scene. I don't know whether it's coming to land or it's just it looks like it's coming into land. So it looks like we've got a second life flight helicopter in play here. One has already transported to Hermann Hospital one of the officers shot, one of the 5 officers shot in this situation. We are covering the NBC Nightly News right now, which began about 3 minutes ago, continuing our coverage here in Southeast Houston, where 5 Houston police officers who were serving a warrant at a home on the 7800 block of Harding Street were taken under fire. 5 of them were wounded, at least 1 critically and possibly more now that we see 2 more life flight helicopters.
We also got some new information, Bill, that Harris County is sending right now deputies to help secure that area. We see that they're having to kind of cordon off that area for the investigation to make sure traffic does not come through, and I guess also probably to make sure that it is safe before they head out. But this investigation, as Bill mentioned, will take hours. And so right now they just are making sure that people can't get into that neighborhood. And it appears that there are very few people kind of out and about.
Lauren, let me interrupt you just a second. Even as our reporters are en route to this scene, we have one of our reporters, Brandon Walker, in the newsroom with some information that he's been able to gather. Brandon?
And Bill, as you guys just mentioned, more officers headed to the scene to get control of the situation there. We did have the chance to speak to a source of ours from the Eastside Patrol who was able to tell us again that there are 3 officers, as you've mentioned, who have been shot, but he also went on to say that this was, quote, a confusing situation, a lot of moving parts as officers on scene there work to get control of this situation. You're looking at these live pictures courtesy of Sky 2 coming into our newsroom. 2 life flight helicopters on scene there at the 7800 block of Harding Street in Southeast Houston. Again, we are confirming that 3 officers have been shot, this according to a source of ours on the east side, though that source continuing to say, Bill and Lauren, that this is a confusing situation as officials there on scene work to get control of this matter. We're looking at these images as they come into the newsroom. You're seeing them for the first time. We're seeing them for the first time. But Lauren and Bill, as we've reported this shooting occurring at around 5 o'clock at the 7800 block of Harding Street, we can tell you that one of the suspects is down. We are working to gather more information about the circumstances surrounding this one. But again, we do know that there was a large group of law enforcement officials going to a house here at the scene, as you can see Sky 2 in front of at the moment, running a warrant, we are told, when those 3 officers were shot. But we still don't know, Bill and Lauren, the circumstances leading up to that situation.
Brandon, let me interrupt you just a second. We have, from our Sky 2 helicopter, we see a person.
I think that may be equipment.
Okay, that's just equipment. There's nobody there. Now, Brandon, let me ask you this. Your source is talking about 3 officers.
Right.
We understand the HPOA, the Houston Police Officers Association, union president has told us there were 5 officers.
Right, and that may be in line, Bill, with just information being slow to be confirmed right now as we get a better idea of what's going on. From what our source was able to tell us over the phone minutes ago, that there were 3. If there were 5, we're still working to get those numbers confirmed, but that's what we were told from someone from East Patrol. So that's one of the many questions we have as we work to figure this one out.
That number 3 was also tweeted out by Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner.
Indeed.
In the tweet from the police chief, it was several officers, so we don't know yet whether there's 3 or 5, and Brandon makes the excellent observation that in a situation like this, the information is very fluid. what we're reporting right now may well change. But we do know that, for sure we know that one officer was life-flighted from this scene to Herman Hospital, 2 others transported by ambulance, possibly, and we have 2 more life flight helicopters on the ground right now, as you can see right here in the middle of your screen. We also have the Houston Fire Department there responding. At least 2 or 3 ambulances that are on the ground here. And as Brandon and we have been reporting, this began with the serving of a warrant. Officers were trying to serve a warrant at an address here on Harding, 7800 block of Harding, when they were taken under fire by 1 or more people who was able to wound 3 or more officers. We have conflicting information right now whether it was 3 or 5.
This almost looks like, correct me if I'm wrong, like an expanding crime scene at this point. I mean, there appear to be officers kind of all over the place right now. I mean, is it possible that this wasn't a stationary type shooting, that it may have
well, they're certainly going to look into that.
Stretched and spanned more than just
since this is an apparent gang shooting, because one member of the police officer, you see these officers hurrying here for some reason. Since one of the officers was a gang task force officer there on the east side, they may be looking for other suspects. They may be trying to make sure that there aren't people who ran from that house.
That's always something you have to think about. That's a good point.
Indeed, Bill and Lauren, if I can chime in for a second, usually is the case with these investigations, as they're still working to get a better idea of what's going on, be it searching for any potential other additional suspects who may be out there. More officers tend to come to the scene as they get a better idea of what the scene may be, if it continues to grow, etc. And I think that's what we're seeing here as it plays out. But also you see whenever officers are injured while in the line of duty, you see their other brothers and sisters in blue get as close to the scene as possible, oftentimes, to be there as a point of solidarity, definitely. So I think we're seeing a lot of that playing out right here as we look at these live images coming through. There
has been an additional tweet from Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner. He has said that at least 3 police officers have been shot. So he earlier said, gave us the number 3. Now he's saying at least 3.
So indeed, it may be 5, because we had heard from the police union president saying that 5 HPD officers had been shot, 4 transported by ambulance, 1 had to be life flighted out of the Southeast Houston neighborhood, presumably to the medical center. And anytime you have a life flight involved, you know that someone's in very critical condition.
Hopefully we can get the police union president on the line with us here, if he's watching or if we're efforting getting him, because they certainly are a good source of information here. These are their folks, and they watch out for them very, very closely. Now we have a second life flight helicopter heading back to the medical center right now, and 1 still on the ground.
Again, we know that these were Eastside officers, as we have been told. At least 1 was a gang task force member, and this all happened as a result of a warrant that they were serving today at a home in the 7800 block of Harding when some sort of gunfight ensued. We know that Mayor Turner tweeted out earlier that the shooter, the suspect in this case, was down. And so what you're looking at now is basically the aftermath of that and the investigation.
Eastside Patrol gets a lot of these types of calls. What we don't see in Houston very often, and I've been searching my memory here, is multiple police officers shot at the same scene at the same time. We know that at least 3 have been shot, and possibly, according to one report from the Police Officers Union, that 5 officers have been wounded in this shootout as they attempted to serve a warrant on a home here on Harding Street.
And so as we try and get more information, certainly we have reporters headed to this scene here in Southeast Houston, but we also have reporters headed to the medical center where those officers have been taken. We have Ben Taub Hospital and Memorial Hermann Hospital there in the medical center, both level 1 trauma centers, both of them really world-renowned when it comes to trauma.
One of our reporters, Andy Sirota, with excellent sources in the Houston Police Department, has told us that his sources are telling him that there have been 5 officers wounded and that they were narcotics officers.
Okay.
So even though one of them may have been on the gang task force, they were all involved in investigating narcotics use and trafficking, and they were serving a warrant that may have been narcotics related. When they got there, whoever was the subject of this warrant, whether it was one or more, definitely did not want to be taken, and they opened fire on these officers.
We don't know if this firefight that ensued, if it was just basically isolated to that one home, possibly the porch. We don't know if the officers were inside that home. At this point, we're just waiting to get more information about exactly how this played out, but it did result in, from what we understand, 5 HPD officers being shot. We know one, because of the life flight, we're assuming was critically injured.
You'll recall it some years ago, at least 3, but not more than 5 years ago, five police officers were shot and killed in Dallas one night, and I believe 5 is the number. And I was thinking even back then, thank God we don't see that kind of thing here, where multiple police officers are shot during the same incident. Now we have it.
Here. Let's get out to Ben Taub Hospital. We have our Jacob Rascone. He is live outside there to give us some more information. Do we know if the officers have been taken there to Ben Taub, if they've arrived yet, Jacob?
Lauren and Bill, they have not yet. We are talking to officers out here, and they're waiting for this officer to arrive. We don't know which or how many officers they're expecting. I asked, and they said, we don't know. We're just ready. We're trying to be ready. There have been ambulances that have gone by past us. We think probably to Memorial. We hear that they're going to Memorial and Ben Taub, and we're here at Ben Taub waiting along with the rest of law enforcement, some nurses and others, just waiting for the police escort with an ambulance to come by. So on our way here, it took us a lot longer than normal because a lot of the exits and on-ramps are blocked to make way and make room for those ambulances or the ambulance. We're probably 30 minutes or so from the scene, about 10 miles away or so, just waiting for that officer or those officers to arrive at Ben Taub. And as I said, we understand that they'll go not just here, but also to Memorial, which is just next door. So we're here standing by along with everybody else, just waiting and hoping that their injuries are not so severe that they can't work on them, treat them, and help those officers get better.
All right, Jacob, thank you. Jacob Rascone at Ben Taub Hospital. When he referred to Memorial being right next door, he's talking about Memorial Hermann Hospital, which is right next door to Ben Taub. And that is where the Life Flight helicopters land there at Hermann. Now we've got another ambulance landing here, another Life Flight ambulance. Mm-hmm. So we have 2 back on the ground here. One just took off. Don't know whether it was transporting or not, but it took off. And we had early word, perhaps 15, 20 minutes ago, that a Life Flight helicopter had delivered one of the officers to the medical center.
And it looks like there is someone on that stretcher that we see there. And right now, it's just taking those ambulances a while to actually get to the hospitals because, keep in mind, we're right here in the middle of 5 o'clock traffic. And so they may have decided to instead use a Life Flight because it looks like they are putting someone on that.
Usually it has to do with how life-threatening the injury is, but in this case, because of rush hour traffic and trying to get these officers there, the helicopter is the most, I was about to say efficacious, the best way to do it. Let's get back to Jacob Rascone, where one of the ambulances is pulling up there. Jacob? Oh, we don't have Jacob.
Bill, this is the second ambulance. Bill, this is the second ambulance that we've seen escorted just past us. We do understand, as I said, and we've been talking to officers, that they are expecting right where we are at least an officer, maybe more. But so far, none of those ambulances have come here. As I said, and you pointed out that Memorial Hermann is next door. A couple of police escorts and 2 ambulances appear to have gone just past us, perhaps to Memorial Hermann. We understand that the suspect is also in an ambulance. We don't know, of course, whether he was in one of those. As far as the officer that I spoke to here knows, he doesn't know if the suspect will come right here or just the officer or officers. So right now it's just a hurry up and wait situation. Everybody on their toes waiting for the officer or officers or anybody else to arrive. Bill?
Okay, Jacob. Jacob Rascone is at Bentob Hospital right now as ambulances arrive there. The life flight helicopters land at Memorial Hermann, which is right next door, where the life flight pad is. We have 2 on the ground here at the scene in the 5800 block of Harding. We believe that 2 of the helicopters have transported. One of them this one that just landed may be coming back to the scene now for more people. Now, we are pretty sure at this point that 5 officers have been wounded in this shootout that began with a warrant being served. We have 2 sources for this now, both the president of the Houston Police Officers Association, the union president, and also sources that were developed by our anchor reporter, Andy Sirota, who reported to him that there were 5 officers shot. They were delivering all these officers were narcotics officers. Not sure that they came out of Eastside Patrol or where exactly, but they were serving a warrant on a home that may have been narcotics related when they were taken under fire by someone in or around that house. 5 officers wounded in this gunfire, and apparently only 1 shooter. We also understand now that in addition to the sheriff's offices, which is sending sheriff's deputies to respond to this scene, ATF, the Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, ATF agents are also going there to investigate because of the weapons that were involved here, weapon or weapons.
Yeah, and we've been talking about that all of the officers and also the suspect, from what we understand at this point, are headed to Bentob and Memorial Hermann, and we know that those are level 1 trauma centers. Bentob, which has been a level 1 trauma center for quite some time now, at least on their website, boasts that they care for 80,000 trauma patients a year. So I know my husband always used to say when he worked at Bentob, not in the trauma department, but they're so good there. If you can make it there, your chances of survival are significant.
Absolutely.
We're lucky to have multiple level 1 trauma centers here in the Houston area.
Lauren referring to her husband, who is a physician, and many of them spend time during their residency at one of our trauma centers here. We have excellent ones here, some of the best in the nation. Bentob was the first one. Hermann, right next door, is also a level 1 trauma center, which you would expect in a place like the Texas Medical Center. So these officers are getting the best care possible, and they're getting to those who need it the most are getting to the hospital very quickly by helicopter. Probably takes less than 10 or 15 minutes to get them from this scene to the hospital.
We know it was taking the ambulances, though, from what Jacob was saying, although it was just about 10 miles from the scene to the medical center, it was taking them over 30 minutes to actually get those officers to the medical center. So we know right in the middle of rush hour traffic, it's just taking some time. Although from what we understand, right now we have all different agencies and law enforcement there on the scene, kind of blocking traffic so that they are able to get through easier. But still, it's just taking some time because of the sheer volume of traffic out there right now.
You see the fire apparatus there from the Houston Police Department and the ambulances, and they respond because they're all paramedics or EMS, and they are able to help with those who have been injured or wounded right there at the scene. And they always respond in cases where an ambulance is sent to a scene like this, either a confirmed heart attack or a shooting.
And we understand that this is the Gloverdale neighborhood. Again, that is in Southeast Houston, more on the east side. And right now, police officers are asking people to please try and avoid that neighborhood while they conduct this investigation if they can. So again, that is near the 7800 block of Harding. That is where this all started. They were serving a warrant there around the 5 o'clock hour when this all began. And so right now, police are asking if you live or work or are going to be traveling through the Gloverdale neighborhood to please try and avoid the area if you can, because this is a massive investigation they have going on right now. We have multiple police officers who have been shot, at least one in a very critical condition at this point, because we know he was life-flighted, the officer was life-flighted, and so that always indicates to us that that officer is in critical, grave, possibly condition. And so they're just asking everyone, if they can, to please avoid that area for the officers to conduct this investigation. We know right now that the ATF Houston is responding and also assisting in this. We also know that the county has also sent some of their officers. Harris County has sent some deputies out there to also try and help. And also specifically, I believe they said with traffic control and things like that. So they're also assisting. So we really have all hands on deck at this point trying to get this investigation
We do
shored
have
up.
an update here,
Okay.
Lauren. We understand now that one suspect is dead, has been shot to death. There are two others, unknown condition, possibly still inside the house where the warrant was being served, which would account for all these officers now because we still have two suspects here in play. I don't think they're sure yet whether those suspects are wounded or whether they are still viable, still in play.
Or could they
Although
have
I would
fled?
doubt it because I don't see SWAT activity. I don't see that kind of activity here.
They would be canvassing the neighborhood. That's true.
Yeah, I think that they think there are two suspects in the house and maybe wounded and or dead. Looking at a map of this area, this Harding Street, this is just west of Harrisburg. For those of you familiar with the East End and south of Magnolia Park, this is over on the east side. We have somebody at the scene here now?
Yes. Okay.
Sally Mamdou is there. Sally?
Bill, we just got here on scene, and there's a lot going on. We've seen an ambulance just drive by where we're standing right now, which is right on Harding. If you can see, the ambulance is pulling out of that driveway right now, but it just got here. There are several cops on scene. There's still several areas that are being closed off to the public, but there's several people out here, and still the information is very fluid. We still don't know what caused the shooting, but we know from police that 5 HPD officers were shot while serving a warrant out here at the 7800 block of Harding Street in southeast Houston. We also know that several officers have been airlifted and others were transported to an ambulance. Now, we still don't know the circumstances behind the shooting and what prompted the shooting, but we know that several officers have been wounded. There's such a large police presence here. We've seen not just HPD officers, but we've seen deputies and constables out here securing this area. It just still seems from just being here for just a few minutes that it's still a fluid scene. They're still working something at that location. It doesn't seem like it has been completely secured yet. So a lot of going on right now at the scene here. And as you can see, we don't know who is in this ambulance you're looking at, but this ambulance just got here as we got here, and it seems to be pulling out of nearby that house where the shooting took place. And again, Bill, lots going on, and as soon as we have more information, we'll make sure to bring it to you. Back to you.
All right, Sally, that's Sally Mamdou. She's on the scene there, our first reporter on the ground. We've had reporters in our newsroom also reporting on this story, getting the information that is available. What we know right now, and as Sally has reported, there are 5 officers who have been shot and wounded in this, and we have 2 good sources for that number. Initial number was 3. Now we're hearing 5. We have a life flight helicopter on the ground still there, and I don't know what it's waiting for, but we've seen 2 helicopters lift off, and one of them before we were on scene. And incidentally, we were on scene probably within 3 to 5 minutes after the Chief Art Acevedo tweeted out that several officers had been shot and asking for prayers for the officers who were on their way to assist in this.
And so, again, we know that, according to the information we're getting now, 1 suspect is confirmed dead in this, 2 other suspects unknown at this point.
This area, again, as I was trying to locate it for you, is right there near Canal Street, not far from the ship channel, 225 and Loop 610, just west of where those 2 intersect, 610 and Highway 225, over on the east end of town. What did you call that neighborhood?
Gloverdale neighborhood is what they're calling it, yes. And it's on the east side, the Gloverdale neighborhood.
The Gloverdale neighborhood.
Officers asking if you live over there or if you need to travel through that area to try and please avoid it in the next several hours if you can.
This is a situation that when the investigation has not even really begun. All they're doing right now is being responsive to the situation as it has occurred here on the ground. 5 officers shot, 1 suspect killed, 2 more possibly inside a house, not sure what their condition is. Lauren Freeman is leaving. Thank you, Lauren.
Yes,
great job. She's being replaced here by Dominique Saxa, who co-anchors with me here at 6 o'clock. We've been on the air since 5 with this. We covered nightly news because I cannot recall in 47 years here where we had so many officers shot at one time and at one scene. And just, Dominica, we were just mentioning that during our 5 o'clock newscast, we had a news conference with Houston Police Chief and Art Acevedo and Mayor Sylvester Turner held a news conference to tell reporters that crime was down in Houston.
Right, but violent
that they were
crime.
very proud of that, with one major exception being violent crime. And they said that most of the crime, the violent crime that happens here, is because of gangs or because of their family-related, family issue calls. And this is most definitely a gang situation. We had officers trying to serve a warrant at an address here in the 7800 block of Harding Street in Southeast Houston. They were narcotics officers. One of them was a member of the gang task force here. They encountered some very bad people here that did not want to be taken and opened fire on police officers. That is a hardened criminal who will fire on police officers like that, especially when there are so many. The fact that 5 of them were apparently wounded in gunfire that quickly tells me that there was a semi-automatic weapon involved and had to have been a long gun. I don't think you can do that with a pistol that quickly. Officers are too smart to group up that much. So because of that, ATF, the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms agents are responding to this scene as well right now, in addition to the Sheriff's Department, Dominique.
And Bill, the latest information I have, and I don't know if you've shared this yet, but a total of 3 suspects involved, 1 dead, 2 of them still located in a house. Now, we don't know if they are
I was just saying that as you were miking up and getting seated here. And the 2 that are still apparently in that house, as you say, they're not sure whether they're wounded, but I don't think they have eyes on them, because if they did, we'd know. All we know is that they at one time saw 3 people in there. 1 of them is dead, they know that, and that there may be 2 more in the house, and their conditions are known, telling us that they may have been shot or they may just be holed up in there. But to that point, I don't see SWAT activity, so I kind of doubt that they think they're in play still.
True. If you're just joining us, it's 5:59. We usually begin our 6 o'clock newscast right around now. We do want to recap the breaking news that we've been covering for about 40 minutes at this point. It is been confirmed, according to Andy Sirota, his source at the scene, that 5 officers are shot. They are reportedly narcotics officers. We're told that 3 were taken by life flight. We have another 2 taken to Ben Taub Memorial Hermann, our level 1 trauma centers there. All this began with a warrant being served on the east side of town. It's Eastside Patrol. The address around 7800 Harding Street, around Canal and 225 on the east side. Several ambulances, firefighter apparatus, many emergency personnel responding to this scene.
Okay, we're just understanding now that all 5 officers who have been wounded in this shootout in Southeast Houston are at Memorial Hermann Hospital, and that makes sense because that's where the life flight helicopters land, and we've seen at least 3 of them take off since we got to the scene with our own helicopter, and we understand that 1 had left before that. So 5 officers now being treated at Memorial Hermann Hospital, which is another level 1 trauma center in the Texas Medical Center.
And we understand also an ambulance was taken to Ben Taub Hospital. We don't know if that was one of the suspects involved. We do know 1 is dead. We don't know if 1 was transported via ambulance and was pronounced dead at that point. 2 suspects are in a house. We don't know their condition. You know, Bill, you were speculating as to the type of weapons involved here, because like you, I can't recall a time when we've had this number of officers injured in a shooting. So, you know, I think it's safe to speculate that some type of semi-automatic weapon was used here.
Oh, definitely. Definitely a semi-automatic and probably a long gun. And we are now moving, I understand, Jacob Brascone, who was at Ben Taub Hospital watching the ambulances whiz by, We are moving him to Memorial Hermann Hospital right next door. So that takes a little bit of effort. We have to move our live truck over there. We got to move them, and they got to get in position. But he'll be able to do much better reporting from Hermann Hospital once he arrives, because that, it appears, is where all 5 officers have been transported, most of them flown by a life flight helicopter.
We do have crews en route. As you and Lauren mentioned, this is the height of rush hour traffic at 6 o'clock in the evening. Streets, especially freeways, are gridlocked. We've got reporters that are en route to the scene, taking a little bit longer than usual to get there because they're sitting in traffic just like the rest of us. And even it was noted that it's taking the ambulances a while to get over to the hospitals for the very same reason. There's a lot of rush hour. This is on the southeast side of town. We've been talking about all that construction that's taking place on that 45 connector ramp. That is the way that you would make your way into town if you were heading over to the Med Center. So that construction that's taking place, 45, the Gulf Freeway northbound before you get into downtown, likely having an impact on the ability of these emergency vehicles to make their way to the west to get over to the Med Center. So we do have reporters en route. Like you mentioned, Jacob Rascone is now moving to Memorial Hermann, where we know the life flight. And
we do have one reporter on the scene. Sally Mamdouh has joined us once. She's trying to do some reporting right now. Very difficult to do when you can't get much closer than they're being allowed to get in, because now when we joined, this was a very active crime scene, not very organized, but now we can see where they've cordoned off the area, and our crews are going to be kept right outside that. Sally's trying to gather more information, do some report. Is she ready?
She's ready.
Let's go to Sally Mamdouh right now. Sally?
And Bill, as I told you earlier, still a very fluid scene. We've actually seen the sheriff himself here. Actually, he just walked out from this area here wearing a bulletproof vest. We've also seen several SWAT members out here. So it just goes to tell us that it's still an ongoing situation right now. Several officers continue to fill up this area here. As you can see, we're seeing HPD officers, we're seeing deputies, we're seeing just several officers come out here. Now, they told us several of these officers that were involved are undercover officers that were doing serving a warrant. We still trying to confirm a lot of the information that we are getting right now, but as you can see, it's still a very fluid situation. We've seen an ambulance come by here, pick up someone from this scene. We've also seen several officers just continue to come out here. We don't believe that the scene is over yet. We don't believe that the scene is fully contained. So we're going to be out here following this story for you. But as you can see, we keep seeing a lot of SWAT members just head that way to where the house where the shooting took place happened. And as I told you, Bill, this is an ongoing situation out here. Information is very fluid. We know very little. We know that 5 officers have been shot. A couple have been transported to the hospital. Some airlifted, some taken by ambulance. We don't know really the status yet, the confirmed status yet on the suspect situation or how many suspects we have. And we certainly don't have the conditions of these officers that are now been transported to the hospital. And as soon as we have information, we are actually waiting on a press conference from the chief himself to update us on the situation right now. And as soon as we have that information, we'll make sure to bring it to you. Bill?
Sally, let me just ask you one question. You told me that you saw Sheriff Ed Gonzalez there on scene, correct?
Yes, sir.
But you have not seen the police chief?
We have not seen the police chief, but we did see Ed Gonzalez come out from the area where the shooting might have taken place, and he was speaking to other HPD officers as well as to other deputies. We didn't really have a chance to speak to him on why he was there, but he is definitely on scene here, and we've seen him just walk around and talking to several captains and lieutenants from the HPD.
Sally, I've got a quick question for you.
Just one second. The producer covered you when you were talking just now, Sally. Who did you see? I asked you if you'd seen the police chief, and then I didn't hear who you said you did see there from HPD. Can you tell me that again?
No, I did see the sheriff, Ed Gonzalez, and he was talking to several officers from HPD, but I did not see the chief yet. We have not seen the chief. The chief is expected to give us an update soon.
Let me just tell you this, that we now understand that any and all updates, news conferences, etc., Sally, are going to be happening at Hermann Hospital, where the officers, 5 officers, are being treated right now. So it's unlikely that the police chief or the mayor will go to the scene right now, because they will be holding these news conferences probably at the hospital. But thank you for letting us know that the sheriff is there. Go ahead.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay.
No, we've seen a lot of officers come here and talk to us while we're waiting just to learn information, and a lot of them have been telling us that we're going to be getting an update, and that's where the information about the chief talking to us came from.
Okay.
But it's very fluid, and he could be just at the hospital giving updates over there. Like I said, Bill, it's been a very fluid situation. We know very little because it's still an ongoing scene out here.
Thank you very much, Sally.
I've got a quick question for you before you go. The chopper has been poised on a Sellers Brothers, which is a grocery and convenience store. Seems to be a bit of a staging area, and I don't know if you know, but can you tell us where in relation the house is to that area?
We are seeing, I mean, we're seeing several helicopters hovering over us, so I'm not sure as to the location where we're at. Right now, we're by Berkeley and Harding Street. That's the intersection where all the media has been staging, and that's where we've been at. But I've seen helicopters just hovering over for a little bit and kind of going everywhere. There's just several helicopters in the air that's been just coming and going.
Okay.
Great, Sally. Thank you.
Where I'm at right now is Berkeley and Harding.
Okay, and we understand that the area Dominique was asking about is several blocks away. Let us update you on the situation here. About 1 hour ago, we got a tweet from Houston Police Chief Art Acevedo saying that several Houston police officers had been shot, asking for prayers for them and for the officers who were on the way to assist in the situation. The mayor then tweeted that 3 officers had been shot. We later learned that 5 officers in total have been shot and are all being treated right now at Memorial Hermann Hospital in the Texas Medical Center. They were attempting to serve a warrant at a home in the 7800 block of Hardin Street in Southeast Houston, over in the Harrisburg Magnolia Park, South Magnolia Park area near the Houston Ship Channel. These were all 5 officers were narcotics officers serving a warrant there. When they approached the door, they were engaged by gunfire by 1 or more people inside that house.
We do have ambulances and Life Flight headed to Memorial Hermann Hospital. We have our Jacob Rascone, who was at Ben Taub, now moving over to Memorial Hermann. We do understand that all news conferences will be taking place from Memorial Hermann Hospital. So we want you to know that our Jacob Rascone is there, poised and ready for when that happens and as soon as he gets new information. But as you can see, it is still an active scene as the sun sets and we approach nightfall here on a Monday, and a very sad and tragic Monday, where we have reports of 5 officers shot. No word of condition, but a very difficult scene for family in blue, for the men and women who serve us and put their lives at risk every single day to protect and to serve our community. And this is a prime example of that risk and just how precious life is. And we offer our hopes and prayers for these officers shot. We do not know condition at this point. That is obviously the first question we're going to ask, is if we have any word on their well-being. But again, we are blessed with our level 1 trauma center, so that's where they are headed right now. I understand, Kelsey, can you repeat what you just said?
We have Councilman Dwight Boykin on the telephone joining us. Councilman Boykin, can you hear me?
Yeah, barely.
Yeah. Councilman Boykin, please tell us what you know about this situation.
I really don't know much. I'm over here at the hospital. We have 5 officers that were in a raid, and all I can tell you now is just pray for all 5 of the officers and their family members. We don't have any updates at this point.
Now, this is over on the East End. Do you represent this area?
No, I do not.
Okay.
No.
We appreciate your coming on again. This is Councilman Dwight Boykin. Thank you so much for joining us. Joining us now just to ask that we continue to pray, although he doesn't have really much information. That information is going to come from the Police Chief, Art Acevedo, and the Mayor, who will be conducting news conferences at Hermann Hospital. I don't think they're going to be joining us, Dominique, until they know something definite to tell us about these officers.
Correct. And as Dwight Boykins was alluding, the officers were on scene this afternoon serving a warrant or warrants. And again, these suspects opened fire on the officers. 3 suspects in all, 1 dead, 2 of them at last check were still in that house. We don't know their condition as well. So it's an incredibly fluid scene. It's going to be this way all through the night. an amazing police presence there on the east side of town at 7800 Harding Street. Around, you said that was near Canal and 225, correct?
Yeah, let's get to Jacob Rascon. He has now located himself at Memorial Hermann Hospital, Jacob, where we understand 5 officers are being treated.
That's right. We've been told that all 5 officers have been taken right here to Memorial Hermann Hospital. There were a couple of ambulances, a couple of helicopters, and they are met, of course, with a host of police officers. And as well, we're told that the mayor, Sylvester Turner, was also here, of course, wanting to check on the conditions of those officers. We do not know how any of the officers is doing yet, but we are told that a public information officer is en route to talk to the media and give us an update, hopefully a good one, on how these officers are doing. And until then, we're just all worrying and waiting to see what has happened specifically to these officers. Of course, you might imagine that because they included the helicopters and brought them here so fast, there are, we suppose, some serious injuries, but we do not know the extent of any of the injuries to any of these officers, only that all 5 have been taken here to Memorial Hermann. Initially, we were told that a suspect would also be taken to the hospital here, but when I asked a police officer just 15 minutes ago if that was still the case, she said that she was unaware of a suspect here. So we're still waiting, of course, also to hear whether a suspect will also be taken to this or Ben Taub Hospital. Bill and Dominique.
Okay, Jacob, thank you so much. We got information from our reporters inside the newsroom. Andy Sirota, who has developed excellent sources within the Houston Police Department, says that the narcotics officers who responded to this, who were at this scene to serve this warrant, are out of the Maikawa substation in southeast Houston. That the Keith Garvin has learned from a DEA source, Drug Enforcement Agency, that the gang task force was involved in this arrest, or this warrant service this afternoon as well. And we also have, but will not report, officers' names. We've heard from sources who these officers are, but we are not going to report them because they have not been confirmed to us, and we don't know whether their relatives have been confirmed, have been communicated with regarding their loved ones. But we do have at least 2 names. We know that that 3 Life Flight helicopters took 3 of these 5 wounded officers to Hermann Hospital, where Jacob Rascon is reporting right now. 2 others were taken there as well. I'm not quite sure how they got there. So we have, Dominique, at least 3 officers who are very severely wounded that have flown there. Okay. Let's go back to Sally right now at the scene. Sally?
Okay. As you can see, we are being told to move right now, and we just saw Chief Art Acevedo just kind of sprint to the scene right now. As you can see, just a few moments ago, we saw several SWAT members walk to the house, but the chief is now on scene, as you can see right now, walking to that scene. And they told a lot of the officers to kind of secure the perimeter around, and I think they're asking us to move here in a little bit, but they just talked shortly to us, and then they are sprinting to the scene. The chief has his bulletproof vest on, along with another police officer, HPD police officer, and they're all heading to the scene right now. Earlier, about a few minutes ago, I'd say about 5 minutes, we heard some negotiation go on between some of the officers and believed to be a suspect in that area that has barricaded himself. We still don't know what the negotiations are about. We still don't know if they have the suspect or they don't, but we know that the chief just got here and he just walked to that area where the shooting took place earlier. Bill?
All right, Sally, thanks so much. Sally Mamdou, our first reporter on the scene here of this shooting. And Dominique, we were told here in email that there would be no information given at the scene because the police chief was going to the hospital, but now Sally just spotted him and showed us the chief from the back running up Harding Street here.
Well, it's, you know, with any type of an investigation, especially one of this magnitude, things can change and will change and have changed. So We don't know for sure, even though they have said there will be no news conferences taking place from there. We are on a watch, wait, and see mode. So we will cover every angle. If they do offer up a news conference from the scene, we will take that for you, or if it's from Memorial Hermann. But we do confirm via our live shot that Houston Police Chief Art Acevedo promptly arrived on that scene and was rushing over to communicate with his officers there to get an update. So we have that covered for you there. We have Jacob Rascone, who is now at Memorial Hermann Hospital, waiting for the officers to come in, waiting to get new information. What we just heard from Sally Mamdou is that police officers there are communicating with the suspects via loudspeaker. So we had mentioned that there were 2 suspects still inside a house. We have confirmed that 1 is dead, 2 are inside a house. At least one of them is still alive because there is some kind of communication going on between the officers and a suspect, if not both suspects. So we don't know as to a condition, but obviously they are trying to work to get those suspects out. So it's still a very fluid scene there. The entire area is barricaded. There is no going in and out of the area around 7800 Harding Street. Numerous emergency vehicles have responded. We've seen several Life Flight helicopters leave, ambulances leave as well. Ambulances still on the scene, HFD on the scene. So it is an enormous amount of emergency personnel and response to this shooting that took place a little after 5 o'clock today as a warrant was being served by the gang task force. And this shooting took place. 5 officers shot at one scene. So it is an incredibly traumatic situation, especially for the families of these officers and any family of any police officer. This is the last thing you want to see and hear. So we are being very respectful in reporting. We will not release names until the police department has released information.
Aside from the family members of the officers who were wounded here this evening, the person probably most concerned and most upset about what has happened here is the police chief, Art Acevedo. We saw the back of the chief as he hustled up the street here. We had been told that the information would be coming from a news conference, a media staging area at Hermann Hospital. But I was sort of surprised when I heard that, and that the chief himself would not make the scene. He makes scenes that are misdemeanors, even on the weekend. So for him not to appear at the scene would have been rather surprising to me. He is there right now trying to find out what's going on to keep the rest of his officers safe.
And Bill, we have a statement from Texas Governor Greg Abbott, and it reads, "This evening's horrific attack on police officers is a solemn reminder of the service and sacrifice that our brave men and women in law enforcement make every day to keep us safe. The city of Houston and the Houston Police Department will have whatever state resources they need to bring swift justice to those involved. I ask all Texans to join Cecilia and me in praying for the officers injured and for the continued safety of all law enforcement officers who protect our communities."
The last time we heard the governor respond to a situation like this was several years ago when several Dallas police officers were shot on an evening. It was back during the height of the Black Lives Matter movement. And I believe 5 Dallas police officers were shot and killed that night in Dallas.
That's right.
This is something, this kind of mass police shooting is something I cannot recall in all my years in Houston, having arrived here in 1973. I've seen where 2 officers were shot. I can't even searching my memory, think of 3 officers shot, let alone 5. All of them shot by somebody who did not want to be served a warrant and taken under arrest on the 7800 block of Harding Street in Southeast Houston, as 5 narcotics officers and one of them a member of the Houston Police Gang Task Force tried to serve this warrant or warrants on person or persons at that address. And as I've observed earlier, when you have somebody being served a warrant, possibly to be arrested, to open fire on police officers like that, it indicates a very hardcore criminal and or someone who is exceptionally desperate about not being arrested. I have not seen this kind of shooting develop into this situation in Houston ever.
And we do know there were 3 suspects involved in all of this. 1 dead, 2 in a house. Officers communicating with at least one of those suspects. And like you mentioned, this was a gang task force response. So our officers working diligently to crack down on gang violence in this community. These are the types of stories that we bring you. Our investigators work extensively on these types of stories because we know that violent crime is a concern of yours. It's a concern for our police department, where in fact they even today reported that even though overall crime is down, violent crime is up. And here, case in point, this Monday evening, we are now dealing with the fallout from this violent crime and from gang activity here in Houston, with a warrant being served and suspects opening fire and shooting 5 of our officers.
We're told, Dominique, that our Sky 2 helicopter, which has been on scene now for almost an hour and 20 minutes, is going to have to leave soon to refuel. So we're going to lose the only video that we have of this crime scene. No, we do. Is this a live shot on ground? We do have live camera shot on the ground now, so that's good because that'll be able to help us cover as the helicopter leaves to refuel. This situation is going to be going on all night long. The investigators, the crime scene investigators will be arriving. They'll be putting lights up in this area. That hasn't even begun because the police department is still in response mode right now. They still have suspects, so the investigation into what happened and why cannot begin until that happens. You see here a man trying to bring his daughter home from school in this neighborhood.
Yeah, and this neighborhood is essentially blocked off. What we have been seeing from our chopper shot is a very large perimeter around this neighborhood sealed by emergency vehicles. And Bill, I understand that our Keith Garvin is now near the scene. Keith, what can you tell us from your perspective?
Yeah, that's right, Dominique. Bill, the perimeter is very, very wide. We are at 610 Loop, the South Loop, 610 at Broadway, and this is as close as we can get. We are several blocks away from that scene because, as you can take a look, we have officers here not only from HPD but also from the State Highway Patrol blocking off this area. They are keeping people away. You can see the traffic that's being diverted because this is still an active scene. I know you all have been reporting, but from what we've been able to get on the ground as well, is that there are at least still 2 suspects who are inside of that home where this warrant was being served. 1 suspect is dead, but 2 are still barricaded inside. This is a very active scene, and so officers do not want anyone near. They're asking all residents to, if you're coming home from work, if you're coming home from school activities, bringing the kids home, make sure you stay away. HPD has been sending out tweets along with the Office of Emergency Management for the city of Houston as well. And this area is really, really hard to get into because, again, right now we have this very active scene with 5 officers who have been shot. All of them, from what we've been told, have been transported to hospitals inside of the medical center. And they still have many officers from several different agencies. We not only have the state troopers out here, as you can see, but also from the Harris County Sheriff's Office and a few other from constables' offices are here as well. And so they have all worked together, have come in to join to try to go ahead and get these 2 suspects out. I imagine they would want them out alive so they can answer for what's been done, what they are accused of doing. But at this point, it is very, very hard to get to this location. Oftentimes in a story like this, even when it comes to police activity, the media, we are oftentimes allowed to get a lot closer than we are being allowed right now. But because this is an active scene and because of the nature of what has happened with the 5 officers being shot, the law enforcement who are on scene are keeping us away as far as they can. We also know that there are ATF officers on scene as well. And so, again, we are at Broadway and 610, the South Loop East, and this is as close as we can get right now. We're a few blocks away. Adrian Crooks, the photographer, the direction he's shooting down now, that is the neighborhood where this standoff is taking place. Again, from what we know, 5 officers shot. They have been transported away from this area. But we have a number of officers from several different agencies who are still here on scene because they have 2 suspects at least 2 suspects who were still there inside. So we actually are going to do our best to try and get a little bit closer to what is happening because we want to be able to give you more accurate and more thorough reporting. But again, right now at the 610 Loop and Broadway, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up now, get a little bit closer. We'll bring you some new information as soon as we get it. Bill, Dominique.
All right, thank you so much, Keith Garvin. You are located, Keith, on Broadway at 610, correct? That's about 8 blocks away from the scene. You're about 8 blocks south of it. We have another reporter, Sally Mamdouh, Dominique, who's somewhat closer.
Yes, she is there near the scene itself. Sally, what's the latest?
And Dominique, as you can see, it's still an active scene. We actually just saw the chief and another officer drive off in a car. There was somebody in the back. We don't know who that person is. And then another officer approached me and told me that the chief is now on his way to the hospital to give reporters an update, but that's all we know. Again, we just keep seeing more officers come out here to the scene, and a lot of SWAT officers are here at the scene. But we just spotted the chief and another officer and somebody in the back of the car that the chief was in drive off quickly from the scene here. But then I was approached by another officer who told me that the chief should be on his way to give reporters an update once he checks on his officers at the hospital right now. Dominique?
All right, Sally, that's Sally Mamdouh. She is just down the street from the scene here, and if you were watching just about 15 minutes ago, her cameraman or woman was able to show the police chief, Art Acevedo, scurrying up the street that you're looking at right here. So even he couldn't get any closer in his vehicle than where he did. He got out of his vehicle and started half running up the street here to get to the scene to find out what's going on. As Sally just reported, there are SWAT officers on scene, which we had not been able to see during daylight, and that would seem to confirm the fact that they have people holed up.
Correct. Two of them, from what we're understanding, in the house. Those 2 are suspects. These are suspected shooters in this crime that officers continue to negotiate with. 2 in the house, but we don't know if they are injured or not, or if one is dead or not, but we understand 2 are still in the house. One of the suspects is dead. That we have confirmed, so there were 3 in all. So Houston Police Chief Art Acevedo on the scene, talking to his officers, getting briefed. He has now left. He's making his way over to Memorial Hermann Hospital, which by all estimates would be a good 20 to 30-minute ride in traffic right now based on the location of the scene and where they're headed. So that gives us an idea as to when we're going to get a news conference from Houston's police chief. As I scroll through our email and what's been coming in, I do see a tweet from George P. Bush, and he says, praying for the law enforcement officers injured today in Houston, grateful for their willingness to put their lives on the line day in and day out. Hashtag Thin Blue Line. So again, that's a tweet from George P. Bush. But we will be shifting focus shortly to Memorial Hermann Hospital, because that's where our officers are being treated. That's where Houston Police Chief Art Acevedo is making his way to be able to brief all of us on what has transpired, and hopefully the officers' conditions as well, because 3 were taken by life flight over to Memorial Hermann, a level 1 trauma center, to be treated for their wounds. A violent shooting took place today here in Houston on the south side of town at about 5:15 this evening after the gang task force was trying to serve a warrant here, and these 5 officers were met with gunfire. And we have officers down tonight, 5 of them in one scene, and that scene is now surrounded by emergency personnel. This area on 7800 Harding completely blocked off, Bill. People are not being allowed in or out. They've been told to stay put because, as you mentioned, SWAT is there and there is still active communication with suspects.
When Police Chief Acevedo passed Sally's station, which is what this shot you're looking at right now, she observed that the chief was wearing his bulletproof vest. Well, I have never seen him without it. He's been by the station here once before. He was wearing it then. I've seen him at Police Memorial twice. He was wearing it then. And my point being here that these 5 officers who were wounded almost certainly were wearing their bulletproof vests when they attempted to serve this warrant at this home. They had to know that the person they were serving the warrant on was dangerous, that he was wanted for one crime or another, possibly a violent crime. All 5 officers were narcotics officers, one of them on the gang task force. So almost without a doubt, they were all wearing their bulletproof vests, yet they were wounded. So that tells you essentially where they were wounded, either in their arms or legs, or God forbid, a head wound. And we have 3 of them life-flighted by helicopter to Herman Hospital, where they're in unknown condition, fired on by 1 or more people inside this home in the 7800 block of Harding, 2 of whom, as we have been told, are still inside that home, and SWAT team trying to negotiate with them to get them to surrender.
Just to let you know, our chopper has left the scene to refuel. It has been there for some time, and so it was giving you a better perspective of the perimeter of this scene and just how many roads are impacted, because there are numerous ways in and out of this area. Keith Garvin was just at 610 in Broadway, which, as Bill mentioned, was about 7-8 blocks south of the scene. And as you get closer, most of these roads are blocked off with emergency personnel flashing lights. They don't want anybody in or out. So even though our camera shot right now, which is a camera that is poised on the ground, and you can see an officer there in tactical gear, and you don't see a lot of emergency personnel, that's not to say that there isn't a very large and strong presence. There is, and this isn't an area you can get anywhere near, because officers are being diligent in keeping the public out and keeping this area safe as they still work to deal with these 2 people who are holed up inside a home there. The original home where this shooting took place, where 5 officers were shot today in Southeast Houston at 7800 Harding Street. So again, an active scene there. Sally Mamdouh is on scene, so she's reporting what she can as she learns more from her discussions with officers on the scene. Keith Garvin, again, making his way in as close as he can, trying to get more information. Jacob Rascone was at Ben Taub. He's moved over to Memorial Herman because that's where the officers have been transported. Sion Rhodes making her way to Memorial Herman. So as soon as we get, and also Houston Police Chief Art Acevedo, who was just on scene, and if you were with us about 20 minutes ago, you saw him running toward the epicenter of this shootout that took place today, trying to get more information. He will be briefing us as well. He left the scene. He's now headed to Memorial Herman. So that's going to be the next major hub of this story and investigation as we learn more.
I see our helicopter has just landed at Hobby Airport to refuel, so it'll be back up on station over the area in probably about 30 minutes. We will continue to stay on this story just as long as we can to find out. Going into regular programming here, we'll be on at least until 7 o'clock, I'm told, until we find out the condition of these officers who have been shot. We were talking a moment ago about why they were there. They were there to serve a warrant on person or persons inside a home on Harding Street, 7800 block, there in Southeast Houston, which is near Harrisburg, over on the deep East End near the ship channel. They were narcotics officers. One of them was on the gang task force. The police chief had just told us during our 5 o'clock newscast that the biggest problem with violence here was gangs and family shootings, where, you know, shootings happen within families. But gangs being the main focus of violent crime here in the Houston area for the past several years. And now we have a possible gang member or gang members who had the temerity to open fire on police officers trying to serve a warrant. These are very bad hombres here. That anybody who's going to open fire on police officers like that, with that amount of firepower, to hit 5 officers that quickly, but incidentally, that person has been killed, was a very bad actor. So we have a big problem in this town with gangs, Dominique, and the police chief and the mayor both have been warning us all about it for some time now.
That they have, and there are still 2 other players involved at the scene that SWAT is dealing with at the moment. In the meantime, our Sion Rhodes has now arrived at Memorial Herman. Sion?
Yeah, Dominique, took quite a while to get here from the Webster area, and we even got caught up in those kind of rolling roadblocks that HPD had been putting through as they were making sure that the ambulances and other officers arriving to the scene and to the hospital could get here. So took a long time, as you'd mentioned. A live look now outside the hospital where you see throngs of HPD officers. We just saw 2 HPD SUVs arrive, lights and sirens going. We believe perhaps family members were in those SUVs, getting out, rushing to the hospital. But a huge scene here. And again, we are awaiting updates from anyone. We're hearing the mayor is on his way. We're also expecting other updates from other officials with the city and, of course, with HPD. But a lot of people here, a lot of officers here are gathered, of course, hoping to hear good updates about their brothers in blue, along with, of course, the entire Houston media parked across the street waiting to hear. So we are here. We'll bring you live updates as they develop. Back to you.
Sion, thank you very much for that update.
Sion Rhodes joining our Jacob Rascone at Herman Hospital and the Texas Medical Center, where 5 officers are being treated for wounds they received in a shootout with at least one, possibly more, very bad actors in Southeast Houston who were being served a warrant and did not want to be served that warrant and did not want to be arrested, to the extent that they opened fire on these police officers who, understanding the danger they were in, had to have been undergoing some kind of a tactical approach to this house when they were engaged in gunfire. Fortunately, they were able to shoot and kill the shooter before he could do any more damage to the police officers who were arriving there to assist. And in fact, the police chief, when he tweeted out what was happening to us, said, "Please pray for the officers who are en route to assist with this call."
I'm just seeing some information from Jacob Rascone, and he was commenting on violent crime reports. And he had mentioned that reported violent crime overall down in Houston in 2018 compared to 2017 by more than 10%, but homicides were up by 10%. And also, you know... Can
I interrupt you just a second?
Sure.
Nick, they're saying that Sally has a live interview shoot.
Oh, very well. Sally?
So right now she's talking to the Spanish TV station, so she's going to talk a little bit in Spanish, but she was one of the witnesses that arrived right on scene here when the shooting was happening. She just told me that she was driving her car heading home from the gym when all of a sudden she heard the shots. She actually took a couple of pictures and video with her cell phone of just kind of the scene, but at some point she saw one officer shot in the leg, another officer shot in the arm, and actually for a brief moment they brought the officers in the back of her car for about 5 or 10 minutes till the ambulance arrived. They sat in the back of her car, but she said it was just kind of all happened all very fast, and that she just didn't expect. She saw a lot of officers in the area. I know that we keep saying that several officers were shot, but she only was talking about 2, and she said once again one was shot in the arm, the other was shot in the leg, and at some point, you know, until help arrived, they brought these officers to the back of her car. They sat in the back of her car for a little bit until the ambulance arrived or they were taken to the hospital. So she was one of the few people that witnessed this, and she actually captured some of it on her phone, some of the chaos. And you can see in the video the officer that was shot actually running the other direction, and they were just, you can see the chaos of that scene, and we'll make sure here to bring you some of that video here in just a little bit. Back to you.
Sally, to confirm, those officers that were in the back of her car, they were shot in the extremities, correct? Legs and arms? Were they fluid? Were they talking?
I told her what they were saying. She said they didn't say much, but it seemed like they were just, she said they were catching their breath, but yes.
Okay, and that would also confirm the fact, and Bill, you had commented they're wearing bulletproof vests, so that's...
Well, it would suggest that they were. I mean, it would be incredible to think that they would attempt to serve a warrant on a home where they knew there were dangerous people inside without wearing their vests. And that left open the question, where were they wounded? And it would be the extremities or, God forbid, as I mentioned earlier, the head.
Yeah.
This area that we're talking about here, where this happened shortly after 5 o'clock this afternoon, early this evening, is in the Harrisburg, Magnolia Park area on the east end of Houston. This is predominantly populated by working class Hispanic families, many of them immigrants, possibly the one we just heard being interviewed by one of the Spanish-speaking television stations here, who work hard, but who, unfortunately, through no fault of their own, live among the gangs that also populate this area of Southeast Houston. And not to suggest this is the only area, because Northeast and Northwest Houston and Harris County both are havens for gangs. We have well over 200 gangs in the Houston area. Some of them are prison gangs. We have members both in and out of prison. They are responsible for much of the crime that happens in Houston. The murders, which are up by 10 right now for the year, the robberies, the thefts, the burglaries, the drug crime, most of it perpetrated by these gangs and gang members.
We saw, while you were talking about that, Bill, there was a split screen, and on the left was a live picture of what you're seeing now at the Memorial Hermann Hospital. On the right, it showed Police Chief Art Acevedo when he arrived at the scene, which was about 45 minutes ago. So that was, and here it is again. We've re-racked that video for you. So the police chief arrived at scene, picked up his pace to make his way over to his officers to be able to talk and get briefed. And he spent some time there. From there, he left and made his way over to Memorial Hermann Hospital. So from what we understand, he is currently en route from the scene over to Memorial Hermann. And I'm just seeing here as we comb through our mail, we're getting tweets in from people from all over our community. And I see one here from Alex Bregman from the Astros, and he says, "Heartbroken. My thoughts and prayers are with our police officers and their families."
I just got an email from Jose Flores. I don't know whether Jose lives near the scene, but he let me know that that neighborhood is called Pecan Park. And as I had noted on the map earlier, Jose is very close to Milby High School, which is on Broadway there, right near 610. So this is as I mentioned before, a working class, predominantly Hispanic working class neighborhood of hardworking Houstonians who are visited by this gang violence like this. Now that entire area of Pecan Park has been taken over by the Houston Police Department as they try to negotiate possibly with two others who were involved in this shootout today with Houston police officers and apparent gang members.
Our helicopter is at Hobby Airport now, refueling. It will make its way back over to the crime scene.
We see
There's the police chief now
arriving now at Hermann Hospital. He had been at the crime scene. Now he's there to check on his officers who've been wounded. As I mentioned earlier, aside from the family members, some of whom have arrived there to see their loved ones, the person most concerned about these men and women who serve under him is the police chief. So he's walking into the hospital right now to find out what condition they are in, to visit with the family members, offer his support to them. And at some point this evening, he and/or the mayor will be talking with members of the news media who have aggregated there at the hospital, because this is the news media center where we will be getting most of the information this evening.
We have two staging areas, Memorial Hermann being one, because that's where the officers were taken by life flight this evening to be treated at the Level 1 Trauma Center there at Memorial Hermann. Our other area is the crime scene, 7800 Harding Street, and that is still a scene because, as Bill mentioned, we've got SWAT officers on the ground there, and they are still negotiating with two of the suspects who are reportedly still in the house where that warrant was served. And we're also watching to see, there's the police chief.
This is as he was arriving?
As he was arriving. So that's video. That's not a live shot.
We had the live tag on there when we shot it, but we picked it up about right here when we showed it to you a moment ago. And more people are calling to locate this again. It's Harding near Broadway in Southeast Houston. This is and it happened on the 7800 block of Harding, which is just about 8 miles from, 8 blocks from 610 there.
And Broadway.
Just north of that area. And that's where Keith Garvin was reporting a moment ago. He couldn't get any closer. When first we visited this scene from our helicopter, it was a very fresh scene. There'd been nothing cordoned off at that point. You could still see cars driving in the neighborhood. But very quickly now, the police department has cordoned off the area for the investigation that will follow, that will take all night long, possibly into the mid-morning tomorrow, to find out and nail down exactly what's happened here. Crime scene specialists getting their case ready for when it goes to court.
So when we get this news conference, we will be carrying it for you, of course, on our air and on click2houston.com. Officers at Memorial Hermann also communicating with the officers on scene at Harding near Broadway as they still effort getting these suspects out.
Now I'm being told that they're evacuating part of that neighborhood, and Sally Mamdouh has information for us about that. Sally?
Yeah, Bill, just about a few minutes ago, we had one of the officers, a high-ranking officer, approach us and tell us that we should probably leave this area. They have evacuated the neighborhood, the area where this is going on, where we see a lot of SWAT members walking to and walking around. So they've actually told us that the neighborhood, this part of the neighborhood has been evacuated because this is still what he said, quote, a live scene. So it's still an active scene out here. We're still seeing a lot of SWAT team members come out here to this area and go to where that shooting took place. So that is the latest information from the scene here. They've just told us that they have evacuated parts of this neighborhood near where this is all taking place. Bill?
Thank you, Sally. Sally Mamdouh there in the neighborhood. And Sally, if you're told to move, of course you'll have to do that. But I'd kind of wait till the last minute if you can. Sally letting us know what we expected, that they would be evacuating the homes around where this shooting took place, because we still have possibly 2 suspects in that home, and there may be more shooting.
And we don't know the weapon cache that exists, but when you have 5 officers shot at one scene, you can assume that these people are armed and dangerous. 2 suspects in the house. We don't know if both of them are alive, if they are wounded or not, but it is an active scene as they work to get a suspect or suspects out of there. As I see here, I'm seeing a tweet from Senator Ted Cruz that just came in. And he says, Heidi and I are praying for the 5 Houston police officers who were shot today, as well as their families. We will continue to follow this developing story.
Also from the Boston Police Department, the men and women of the Boston Police Department shocked and saddened to hear the news of 5 brave officers from the Houston Police who were shot earlier this evening. We extend our heartfelt thoughts and prayers to the officers, their families, and the entire Houston Police Department. The police department, police officers are a tight-knit community, not only here in the city and the state, but nationwide. They're all consider themselves brothers and sisters and support one another. We've seen a mass shooting like this most recently, at least in Texas, in Dallas some years ago, when 5 police officers were shot and killed. And now it's happened in Houston. As Dominique and I both said, we cannot recall in all our years here this ever happening. More than 2 police officers shot at one time at one scene. And now we have 5. Hopefully that they're going to be okay. 3 of them were life-flighted, flown to the hospital here at Memorial Hermann and the Texas Medical Center. The 2 others may have been taken by ambulance before we arrived on the scene. But when we got there, shortly after the police chief tweeted out what had happened immediately after he learned about it. We immediately reported it. Our helicopter was there 3 minutes later. So we've been on scene long enough to have seen anybody who was transported. And most of what we saw was by helicopter, by life flight helicopter.
Right, I remember those early images. We went on the air with this at around 5:15, 5:20, and you're right. The response with the life flight helicopter, I saw at least 2 of them from that early coverage. And the last bit of video that we saw was Houston's Police Chief Art Acevedo rushing into the hospital. So he's going in to get information about the officers' conditions, talking to the family members of the officers. We have not reported any officers' names. We are respectfully waiting for the Houston police chief to do that. As journalists, we have contacts and sources in the police department, but out of respect, we want to wait and hear from the police chief himself. So we are waiting with our reporters there. We have Jacob Rascone and Sion Rhodes, and as soon as Houston's police chief comes out to offer this news conference, that's when we're going to get the update that we're all anxiously awaiting about these officers' conditions.
It's been noted here in our newsroom that although it's very likely the officers who were involved in serving this warrant and shot today were wearing vests, the vests are not bulletproof beyond a certain caliber. They are bullet resistant, and most of the current issue of bullet-resistant vests are not able to stop high-powered rifle bullets. And so some of them could have had torso wounds as well. Now, very recently I read, and I can't remember which department it was given a gift of money to buy vests that will withstand the force of high-caliber bullets from rifles. Not likely that these officers today were wearing those, though. And it's almost certain that if one individual was able to wound 5 police officers at once that quickly, he more than likely had a long gun, a rifle.
One interesting bit of information we learned from Sally Mamdou at the scene was in her conversation with a witness there. That witness described being present during the moment of that shooting after arriving home from a workout, hearing shots ring out in her neighborhood, and then 2 officers come out and run, and she actually held 2 of the officers in her vehicle until emergency personnel responded. And she talked about their wounds, and she said it was the extremities, the legs and the arms, at least for those 2 officers, and that they were able to talk. So, that was one bit of information that we got, which is helpful in at least knowing 2 of the officers and their injuries, and they were transported to Memorial Hermann, and they're among the other 3.
Dee, I understand now that Keith Garvin, who had been about 8 blocks south of the scene, has now moved to just a few blocks east of it. Keith?
Yes, that is correct, Bill, Dominique. We are now only about 2 blocks away from the scene. We are here at Harding and Elvera, near Harding and Galveston, like you said, just east of the situation. Let me give you a look where we are. Just right down the street, you just had another fire truck come in, EMS personnel. And again, we know that those 5 officers who were shot are no longer here, but this, of course, they're bringing in other vehicles as a precaution, because they obviously, when they have 2 individuals who are inside of a home, who are holed up inside of a home, they don't know exactly what their reaction is going to be. From where we are, not knowing if we would be able to hear or not, but we have not heard any bangs, any loud noises that would indicate the officers at this point are making any moves to get inside of this home. Now, this is a regular neighborhood. As you can see, my photographer, Adrian Crooks, he's going to pull back a little bit. We have another officer arriving on scene. We are just outside of the parking lot of a Sellers Brothers store. And so this is right in the middle of a regular, everyday, average Southeast Houston neighborhood where this has occurred. Adrian's going to move a little bit to give you a better shot. But this happened a little bit before 5 o'clock in just a regular neighborhood, as we know, and those officers were serving that warrant. And as you can see, we have more officers who are arriving here on scene. We were able to get a little bit closer because they are narrowing the perimeter just a little bit. So they have relaxed the perimeter somewhat. But as you get closer to the home, which again is only about 2 blocks east of from where we are, there is still a very, very heavy police presence. And we not only have officers from HPD, but we have troopers from the State Highway Patrol, from DPS. We also have agents from the ATF as well. And so still a very, very active scene, and they continue to bring more officers to this scene. Even though the perimeter has been loosened a little bit, has been shrunk just a little bit, they still have a number of officers who were here on scene. We also know that they have at least a helicopter from either HPD and probably, I'm only seeing 1 right now, but I would imagine that's probably going to be from either HPD or from State Highway Patrol, because all of these agencies are certainly assisting this operation together. But again, we're just a few blocks away from where this occurred. And again, officers still have, as far as they know, 2 suspects who were inside the home. and we are just pushed back a few blocks away. Haven't been able to get and talk to any witnesses, because this is as close, or any witnesses or neighbors. Don't know if we would come across anybody who actually saw any of this occur, but we are still 2 blocks away. We are mainly in an area where officers are staging, so there aren't a lot of customers, not a lot of neighbors around right now, but the situation is still very fluid. We know that Chief Art Acevedo, the Houston Police Department itself, and the Houston Office of Emergency Management still continue to urge people, if they live or work or they have anything to do in this area, they are urging them to stay away, because this is a very active scene, and they just don't want anyone else coming in who could be in harm's way or certainly make their jobs more difficult. So I think this may be as close as we're going to be able to get for this evening, at least right now. From this direction, we are east, just a couple blocks away from where this tragedy has occurred. We're going to continue to gather more information, try to get some more information from the officers who are here on scene, and we'll report to you as soon as we have something. But for now, back to you in the studio.
All right, Keith, thank you so much. We have gotten some new information, Keith, that we're going to report right now. Let's begin with the officers' conditions, Dominique.
Yes, this is a big one. Houston Police Officers Union is reporting that 3 officers are in stable condition. 2 officers are reportedly in critical condition. And we do have an update on the suspects, too.
The police department is saying that there are 2 suspects dead. We had been reporting one was dead. They can now confirm for us that 2 of the suspects in this afternoon's shootout resulted in 5 officers shot, wounded, but now 2 of those suspects are dead, and possibly 1 still inside the house, and the SWAT team is right now trying to confirm whether that 3rd suspect is viable, if he's still alive or he's been wounded, or what his situation is.
And that would explain why people have been moved from the area. They're pulling the media back. People who live in the area have been evacuated as well to stay back, because there's still a SWAT situation around 7800 Harding Street near Broadway. So there's 1 suspect left, but again, 2 of them are now reportedly dead. We are still awaiting a news conference from Houston Police Chief Art Acevedo. We are reading tweets that are coming in, a new one from Houston Texans star J.J. Watt. He says, thinking about the officers involved and hoping everyone is going to be all right.
We've been getting a number of well wishes from around the country right now, and from various individuals whose hearts are with the Houston Police Department and the people of Houston this evening, as we contend with this multi-shooting of police officers, something we have not seen in our community before. We are expecting, we've now been told, Dee, that we're going to hear from the mayor and the police chief at 7:30. Both are at the hospital right now with the officers who were wounded. 2 of them, I think you said, are in critical condition, 3 stable.
Correct.
So they'll be bringing us the information that they have, meeting with reporters at 7:30 there at Herman Hospital.
You are looking now from a camera shot on the ground at the crime scene today. Our Sky 2 helicopter had to leave to refuel at Hobby Airport. Chopper will be back up in air shortly. Keith Garvin was by the grocery store area, which was essentially 2 blocks about east of 7800 Harding Street, where the shooting took place, and that's a bit of a staging area where a lot of emergency vehicles and personnel are stationed. And we also understand that around the house they have evacuated the area because there is still 1 suspect left. There were 3 in all. We have now confirmed that 2 of them are dead. So we have, at this point, 1 suspect left. We don't know if SWAT is still negotiating with that suspect, if they are wounded, or if that person is deceased. But they have basically secured the area. Our reporters have been pulled back a little bit as well to keep everyone safe. But again, we are now awaiting the news conference. We will be, I'm sure, learning who was involved at the shooting today that took place around 5 o'clock. We went on air with it. Bill, I guess you guys broke in at around 5:15, 5:20 with coverage.
And to your point about the news conference that the police chief and the mayor will hold at we're told at 7:30. Our news director, Dave Strickland, has just let me know that we will be on the air until at least then.
7:30.
Whenever that happens, whether it happens at 7:30 or 8 or whenever it happens, we'll be with you until the the police chief and the mayor are able to let us know how our 5 police officers are doing. We know their conditions, 2 critical, 3 stable, but we want to hear it from them, and we want to know how the families are doing. Families were picked up in some cases by the police and brought to the hospital. You can imagine the terror they are in right now at Herman Hospital. Our prayers need to be up for those family members. Mm-hmm. Let's go to, I think we have Joel Eisenbaum now at the hospital.
Yes, Joel?
Yeah, Bill and Dominique, of course, this is a terrible situation, and any reporter who's worth his or her salt has been on the phone with just any source they can get a hold of. Of course, some of those sources are more trusted than others. One of my trusted sources has imparted some information I believe to be reliable, although at this point it's not backed up by a second source. Of course, we're withholding the names that we've learned various ways, but I can tell you, according to this well-placed person within the Houston Police Department, that clearly one of the officers who was shot and brought here to Memorial Herman is in decidedly worse shape than the other officers. That's my understanding this evening. Also, one of the officers who was involved in that incident on the east side, southeast side, apparently has been involved in a shooting before. In fact, has been shot while on the job before, recovered, and we can hear life flight taking off or landing right above me. But another officer, I understand, has been involved in another shooting and in fact has been shot on the job before, recovered, and returned to work. That's really the insight I can give you at this point, but of course we're all waiting with bated breath to hear what the chief has to say in terms of the conditions of these police officers. Let's send it back to you.
That we are, Joel. Thank you very much. That news conference set to take place in roughly 28 minutes, if all holds true, at 7:30. They are promising to give us a news conference as to the conditions of these officers. We do know 3 are stable, 2 are in critical condition. Joel gave us an update from one of his sources as well. So bit by bit, we are piecing this story together. All of this erupted this evening as a gang task force was serving a warrant on the southeast side of town, 7800 Harding Street near Broadway. Our coverage started at around 5:15, 5:20 as we learned about the officers who were shot. We want to show you the aftermath. This is witness cell phone video as it was happening.
SWAT and gunshots. Somebody got shot. There goes SWAT. Look at that. We got 2 SWAT shot officers. That doesn't sound right. Officer down! Officer down! Yeah, right here. Someone's shooting. Someone's shooting.
Oh my Lord, they were shooting at him?
Yeah, they're shooting. They shot 2 SWAT teams. Yeah, there goes one and one's on the floor. Oh, there's 2 on the floor. Yeah.
The SWAT team?
They shot the SWAT team. I don't know who, but they're shooting over there.
Oh my Lord.
There goes one SWAT. He's shot. He's shot in the arm. Real around here.
Dick, is Tommy over here?
Yeah.
Who's down over here? There's a sergeant.
Sorry for all my snaps, guys. Get him! There he is! We got a lifeline on the line. This guy's serious. Not 1, but 2 helicopters.
Again, you're looking at cell phone video taken by neighbors who were on the scene when this happened, the aftermath of the shooting. Extremely good video and good commentary by them. We thank them very much for it. Our Robert Arnold is on the scene as well right now, right, Dee?
That's right, Robert.
Yes, hi. As the crow flies, we're about 2-3 blocks away from where all of this is happening. That's where, as we look down here, you see a huge contingent of officers. We've also seen some federal agents here, specifically from the ATF, from what we're reading on the back of raid jackets. We've also seen state troopers out here helping direct the area. What you have right now is a massive, wide perimeter going in all directions around the 7800 block of Harding. In fact, when we were coming up from Galveston, working on a different story today, when we got on the loop near Broadway, also closer to 225, you could actually see the string of police lights from the freeway. That is how many officers have converged on this area. And again, like I say, they're keeping a massive perimeter in all directions until they have finally cleared this area. One thing that just came out from a tweet from the Houston Police Department is at least one suspect dead. They're still searching the area to see if there are more at this point. Now, they're not letting any traffic into this area at all. However, some of the people who do live a little bit closer to where this police barricade has been set up are being allowed to walk to their homes. Of course, HPD officers are escorting those individuals in. But again, you have this large congregation of officers down there. Like I say, we're about 2-3 blocks away from where this scene happened, and they're talking with each other. Like I said, the federal agents are also involved in this. ATF a lot of times is brought in on this to run checks on guns or other weapons that may have been used in these shootings. So that's why you see some ATF agents down there as well. As for now, most people just being kept out of the area. It's very difficult to move around. So if you do live in this general area, it's best to stay away for now until police have a chance to clear the scene and some of these officers can move out of the way. Bill, Dominique?
All right, Robert Arnold there on the scene for us. The scene being the 5800 block of Hardin Street. Our live Sky 2 helicopter shot has returned as well. We'll be able to take that for you. And here it is now, having refueled at Hobby Airport and returned to the scene. Our latest information is that the police chief and the mayor will hold a news conference in about 25 minutes from now. We will be with you until that happens, whenever it happens, because we want to know what's happened to our 5 officers, make sure that they and their families are being well cared for and supported there at the hospital.
The latest information we have, you now see in the banner below, which says that 3 officers are stable, 2 of them are in critical condition. We offer our prayers for those officers in critical condition, for their families, for all men and women in blue who are very concerned and risk their lives on a daily basis to protect our community. We do understand 2 suspects are dead. There were 3 in all, so that means 1 is left in the house where the shooting took place earlier today. So there is ATF, state troopers who are present, and there's still a SWAT present. So basically, people who live in the area are allowed to get back into their homes. They're being escorted by police to make sure they are safe and don't get in the line of fire or involved anyway in what's taking place there. Anybody who doesn't live or belong there is being told to keep out. There is a wide perimeter around this neighborhood, and as you can see from Sky 2, as the shot widens, you can get an idea just from the flashing lights just how wide it is. It's covering several city blocks around Harding Street and Broadway. When Keith first arrived on the scene, he was at 610 and Broadway, and it took him a while to inch closer to that staging area, which is a few blocks east of the house where that little grocery store is. And even there, our reporters and reporters on scene are being told to keep their distance because, again, it's still an active scene and it's not safe yet.
We're going to take you back to Memorial Hermann Hospital in the Texas Medical Center, where Sion Rhodes is one of our reporters there right now. Sion?
And we are anticipating, Bill, the press conference that is set to happen at 7:30 with Mayor Turner, also with Police Chief Art Acevedo. We did see the chief go in about 30 minutes ago, possibly, of course, to get updates on the officers. Again, we're hearing now more information that 2 of those officers are in critical condition, 3 of them listed as stable. So we were hoping to have more detailed updates, but I want to step out of the way to give you a look at some of the crowds of officers who have come here to show their support. And of course, they're just lined up waiting for any information on their fellow officers. Of course, something like this we have not seen here in the Houston area. Very, very shocking, very jarring to everyone, and of course, especially these officers. We have seen the Houston Police Officers Union head here as well, but we have not spoken to him yet, but he has been tweeting updates, and that's where we learned, of course, about the latest on those officers. But a lot of hugs, a lot of support being given here amongst HPD officers. Back to you.
Sion, let me ask you this. Has the police department set up a media information center there at the hospital? Is that where you are right now? Is that where the news conference will be?
That is where I am, just a little bit to my left. We can't show it to you because there's other reporters getting ready to do their shots as well, but we've got all the microphones set up, all of Houston media staged here just across the street from the emergency room entrance, awaiting an update.
Thank you.
We will definitely be joining you in about 20 minutes if this happens at the time that we're told, 7:30. Thank you, Sion.
And Sion, we saw Houston Police Chief Art Acevedo make his way inside that hospital, I guess about 20 minutes ago. You haven't seen any sign of him since that, have you?
We have not seen any sign of him. We haven't seen any tweets from him. We've also been, of course, looking for updates from the mayor's press secretary. She did tweet that the mayor was on his way here, but we have not seen him here physically yet, although he may have gone in another entrance. But again, we are expecting both of them to be here at that news conference a little bit later on.
Okay, Sion, we look forward to your reporting at that time. Again, roughly 20 minutes away, assuming it happens on time at 7:30, like they've mentioned in their emails to the press.
We have 4 live cameras up right now, one at the hospital, and we have 3 here in the neighborhood of Southeast Houston where this shooting happened this afternoon. Happened just after 5 o'clock. We were in our 5 o'clock newscast. We had just aired a story where the police chief and the mayor had talked about crime being down in Houston with one notable exception, that being violent crime. We had 10 more murders in the past year than we had had previously, so violent crime up, and it was attributed mainly to gangs and then secondarily to family shootings, but gangs being the main thing. And towards the end of it, the mayor said we're going to keep our focus on reducing crime, but the one thing that we have to do is address the problem we have with gangs. And then not 5 minutes later, of course, that had been taped. That had been done earlier this afternoon. But 5 minutes after we aired that story, we got a tweet from the police chief saying that several Houston police officers had been shot, not wounded, not injured, but shot, and to pray for them and the officers who were on their way to assist. We've since found out a great deal more.
We have, and can you imagine the level of tension and anxiety that takes place because we have 5 officers serving a warrant. They are in bullet-resistant gear, not bulletproof. So you know, as you're serving a warrant to people who are involved in gang violence, what you're up against. It is a precarious situation, involves a high amount of risk, and unfortunately, today is a day where we have seen 5 officers wounded at one crime scene with 3 suspects total. 2 of them are dead. 1 of them still holed up inside the house at 7800 Harding Street. SWAT officers on scene, that's what you're seeing on the right-hand side of your screen, dealing with that suspect. On the left-hand side, you see the staging area that's now taken place at Memorial Hermann. It's where all 5 officers have been transported because of the level 1 trauma center there. And we are desperately awaiting word on the 2 officers who are in critical condition.
One thing I think is safe to say is that the police department knows who these persons were in the house. Certainly one of them, because the warrant was being served, might have been served on multiple people. They also know what their affiliation is, their gang affiliation. So part of what we're seeing in this neighborhood right now may well be the police trying to round up more members of this gang. 5 of the officers who approached that house today were narcotics officers, so the warrant apparently was narcotics related. Gangs make their money mostly from narcotics. So if there are more gangs in that area, and the gang task force would know it because they work this area all the time, then they're probably trying to develop more information and sources in the neighborhood as to where these other gang members are who are part of this gang. And they'll want to round them all up.
Sure, and that plays into what Robert Arnold just mentioned when we saw him on scene. He was talking about the large presence of ATF and state troopers there, and ATF responding for that very reason, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. So they are working the scene, and like you said, Bill, they're probably checking door to door and piecing together this puzzle But there is so much information we don't know. As we stay with you live this evening, this is a time when NBC brings you its programming, but we feel this story is too important, and there's so much critical information that needs to come out, and we're awaiting that news conference where we will hear so much more at or around 7:30 this evening from our police chief as well as our mayor.
Aside from the 4 people we are nearly certain were in that house, 3 or 4, there are other members of this organization who are at large right now who will be probably implicated in this in some way or another, and that, I'm sure, is part of what they're trying to do right now, is to find out what they can about whatever it was involved in these warrants they were going to serve, whether it was because of narcotics activity or whatever it was. They'll be trying to round up as many of these people's Confederates as they can to build their case. As we mentioned earlier, the police department's still in response mode because there's at least 1 suspect still at large, still possibly alive and viable. The investigation itself has not begun, where the crime scene unit comes in, finds all the shell casings, where what shot was fired, who was hit when, where, and all that information that will take many, many hours into the night and tomorrow morning. That eventually will begin as well. When we hear from the police chief and the mayor, hopefully in about 15 minutes, we'll learn more about the officers who were involved in this. Possibly we'll learn their names. Possibly we will learn the extent of their injuries. And possibly, hopefully, the news will be encouraging.
That's what we are all praying for, as are elected officials and sports figures in this town who have reached out, opening their arms to the men and women in blue, offering their love and support and prayers tonight for this great big family that works so hard to protect our community. And it is a very traumatic day when you have 5 officers shot and wounded at one crime scene. It's something that, Bill, you and I have not seen as long as we've been reporting news here in Houston.
That has not happened here. I've been here since '73, so that's almost 46 years ago now, and I've never seen this. I've seen 2 officers wounded at a crime scene. Mostly it's 1, and many times it's tragic. But I've never seen this many officers shot at once. These officers were trying to serve a warrant on 1 or more individuals. 5 of them were doing it, at least 5, because we know that many were wounded. There may have been more than 5 officers, but the 5 were involved, were narcotics officers and 1 gang task force member. They wouldn't have appeared there in that number, at that strength, if they weren't expecting trouble. And trouble they got. Somebody opened fire on them, they returned fire, and the exchange of gunfire, we know that 2 suspects were killed, and these 5 officers injured, 2 of them critically.
We even heard the shock and dismay from that witness video that we had on our air maybe 5 minutes ago.
Describe that again, because it was...
Yes, I mean, she was shooting vertically with her cell phone, and she
I'm talking about the woman who told Sally...
about the officers in her car. So she was on scene. She had just finished a workout and had returned home. When she got home, this witness reported hearing the gunfire in the neighborhood, and she then saw officers starting to scatter about, and then she saw 2 of whom that were wounded, and those 2 officers made their way to her car because the response hadn't arrived yet. There weren't ambulances on scene, HFD, so 2 officers, according to this witness, sat in the back of her car. They were wounded. These were extremity wounds, arms and legs, so she said that they were fluid, they were able to talk. But they stayed with her until the ambulance arrived, or the Life Flight helicopter, depending on which way.
That citizen is a hero, and she will be receive a commendation for that, because she was instrumental in saving these officers who were waiting to be helped, and until the help got there, she sheltered them, she harbored them.
That's right. She offered protection. And then here's the other witness who saw this play out.
And gunshots. Somebody got shot. There goes SWAT. Look at that. We got 2 SWAT shot officers. That doesn't sound right. Officer down! Officer down! Yeah, right here, someone's shooting. Someone's shooting.
Oh my Lord, they were shooting at him?
Yeah, they're shooting. They shot two SWAT teams. Yeah, there goes one and one's on the floor. Oh, there's two on the floor, yeah.
The SWAT team?
They shot the SWAT team. I don't know who, but they're shooting over there.
Oh my Lord.
There goes one SWAT. He shot in the arm. Real around here.
Nick, is Tommy over here?
Yeah.
Who's down over here? There's a sergeant.
Sorry for all my snaps, guys. Get him! There he is! We got a lifeline on the line. This guy's serious. One, but two helicopters.
You've been watching a cell phone video provided to us by two of our viewers who live there in this predominantly Hispanic working class neighborhood, who were there when this happened. And I believe, Dominique, that one of them captured one of the officers who got to the safe harbor of that other woman's automobile.
That's what it looked like. We saw that one officer running toward her and then stopping at a car that was parked in the middle of the street. So she may have captured that, not knowing what it was that she was capturing. Sally Mamdouh is on the scene now with the very latest. Sally?
And Dominique, I just spoke to a lieutenant with HPD, and he just told us that the scene has been secured and people are now allowed to go back into their homes, which means there's no threat to the public anymore. This scene that we've been following all day here for the past couple of hours has been secured. He couldn't give us much information. He says any updates will have to come from the chief himself and the mayor over at the memorial scene, where there's several media stagings over there. But for the meantime, this scene has been secured. We've seen a lot of officers start to leave this scene, but they're still keeping us at a distance from where all of this has taken place for safety purposes, as well as for crime scene investigation to kind of continue. But this scene, despite the fact that they just announced to us that it has been secured, is still a fluid situation. We're still learning as to exactly what took place out here on Harding and Berkeley Street. Back to you guys.
Sally, I have a feeling you would have, I know you would have reported this if you had known it, but just let me say that our understanding is that two of the suspects are dead, but there possibly was a third in there that they were looking for. We had one unconfirmed report that they were using robotics to look for this third suspect in there, but in any event, however they did it, they have now cleared the scene. They have cleared the crime scene. It is now declared safe. You didn't hear anything else about that third suspect, right?
No, because it's very difficult. A lot of the officers here have been instructed not to really tell us any much information. They want it to come strictly from the chief. So we've asked about the suspects. We've asked about how many suspects inside, but we were told that any information.
Okay, Sally, thank you so much. Completely understand. Just wanted to make sure. It's Sally Mamdouh on the scene. Also,
and Keith Garvin, not that far away from where Sally is, giving us another vantage point. Keith?
Yes, Dominique, Bill, let me tell you exactly where we are right now. Adrian Crooks, my photographer, is going to zoom in. There's a Sellers Brothers store that you see right here. Well, the location, the 7815 Harding, the home where all this has occurred, is pretty much directly behind that store. So we're a little bit more than a block away from where all of this took place at about 5 o'clock earlier this evening. Now, one new development that we've had in just the last few moments, we just had a life flight helicopter take off and leave from that very scene. At this point, we don't know if who was on that flight in terms of patients, if any patients were on there. But we did confirm, talked to several officers who were here on scene. It was a life flight helicopter that took off about 3 minutes ago now at this point. So we're trying to figure out and ask questions who exactly may have been on in terms of being a patient, or if there were anyone who was a patient on there at all. But again, we are about a block or so away from the location. Right now we're at Harding in Elvira, which is near Harding in Galveston. And right now, just not a lot of citizens or non-law enforcement types are in this area. Right now where we are is a staging area for many of the law enforcement agencies, and we of course have seen every one from HPD to Harris County Sheriffs to a couple of different constables' offices, also Pearland Police. We've seen them up here as well. And so they also just a little while ago, I don't know if Adrian, if we can see that that large trailer being driven by now. It's kind of going past us, but they have brought in some equipment, and actually even a little bit closer, because we do have some public works employees who are out here as well. And what you can see here on the ends of these trucks are lights that they will use in case they need to bring into the neighborhood and put some spotlight on these homes. Right now, SWAT officers also out here as well, and a number of tow truck drivers have shown up as well. We don't know what would need to be towed away, but we have SWAT officers. We also have K-9 units who are out here as well. And so right now, this is still a very, very active scene. Again, that life flight helicopter just took off now less than 5 minutes ago, maybe four or so minutes ago, and right now we're trying to figure out exactly who, if anyone, in terms of being a patient, was on there. But they have brought in some larger vehicles, some more equipment, and usually what we've seen in my experience on scenes like this is when they have a suspect inside, they are trying to negotiate with that person and bring him out. You know, it's been dark, the sun's been down for quite some time now, so they need to bring in these spotlights so they can essentially make the home and the neighborhood and the area pretty much look like it's daylight, so they can see everything that's taking place. And so right now we're going to continue to ask those questions. And now I think, Adrian, if you can see that large vehicle, it's like a semi almost right in front of the store on the left-hand side. That vehicle was brought in just a short while ago. It's sort of a mini command post as well, and we've seen I've seen these before, and as any reporter has seen these vehicles on scenes like this when they have a suspect or more inside of a home, and they bring these in so they can use they have loudspeakers, and they also again act as a mini command post as well. And so it was right next to us probably about 15 minutes ago, and now has edged closer because, as I told you, the home there on Harding where this is all taking place is right on the other side. It's right behind this Sellers Brothers store. And so that's where so much of the activity is taking place. And right behind that store is where we saw that life flight helicopter rise and take off just a few minutes ago. So we're still out here. Again, this is mainly an area where law enforcement is at. They did have some employees who were inside the store who were working. The ones we've talked to so far have not heard. They say they didn't hear any shots. They didn't know about anything that was going on. But we're going to continue to ask those questions, and we'll get more information for you and be back on as soon as we have that information. Guys, back to you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Keith. I want to let you know, I don't know if you heard Sally Mamdou's report just a while ago, but she's reporting that she was told that the scene is now cleared. They have declared it safe. So we know the 2 suspects are dead. We had heard there was a third. If there was a third, they've either arrested him or they found out he wasn't there or whatever. But the scene is secured now. The scene.
Yeah, that is very good.
Go ahead.
Yeah, very good information to know. And again, that very good information to know. That might explain why we saw that life flight helicopter take off. Because if there was a suspect or anyone else who was injured who would need that service, they most likely would have taken that person away at that moment. Or if they were no longer needed on the scene, they of course would take off as well. And so we're seeing. Take a look behind me. We have this is a detective's vehicle that you see leaving here. We have other sheriff's. Deputies' vehicles that are starting to exit the scene, so starting to come together all makes sense. We're starting to see a few officers. He actually is heading back toward the scene, but it does feel slightly more relaxed out here. And again, I think now we put 2 and 2 together, and now that we know that life flight helicopter took off about 5 minutes ago, it would make sense that it would leave, either because it was no longer needed or because it was taking someone from the scene. But as you can see, we have a couple of HPD motorcycle officers who are taking off. And again, we have a lot of tow truck drivers who have shown up to the scene and, again, trying to explain their presence. We'll try to get an answer on that as well. But they have been here, and now you see the truck with some of that lighting equipment moving in. And apparently the scene is clear. They're not going to need any of this equipment. So that obviously is very, very good news in terms of a scene being wrapped up, because no one wants to see this thing prolonged. But if the scene is clear, very, very good news, and we'll be sure to get the very latest information for you online and also tonight at 10 o'clock in our news. Back to you guys.
All right, Keith, thanks so much. Keith Garvin there on the scene. The scene secured now, not cleared. Of course, it won't be cleared until the investigation is completed. Jacob Rascon standing by at Herman Hospital here.
Yeah, Bill, we are awaiting the police chief. We're awaiting the mayor. We know that both are inside. We saw them go in. They've been with the officers. They've been gathering information. The story continues to develop, and of course, when they get out here, we hope that they will lay it all out for us, exactly what happened when the officers arrived, why exactly they were there, where these officers were shot. We understand that 2 of them are very serious. We understand that the other 3 were shot in the extremities or injured somehow in a non-serious or non-life-threatening way. I'll keep looking behind me to make sure that they're not coming. They initially said that 7:30 they would be here, of course, as we know in these situations. A lot of times that is delayed for one reason or another. But according to law enforcement sources talking to KPRC, we have 2 that are very serious, including a couple, or at least one, who was shot in the face, somewhere in the face. So these are very serious conditions. You know that there were helicopters coming to Memorial Hermann. That is how serious these injuries were. We saw the mayor immediately going in. And we're watching now to see who's coming out, because we see some activity. All of the officers that were there waiting right in front of this area where they go in and out are now, as you see, walking back toward the doorway where the police chief and the Houston mayor, Sylvester Turner, went in initially, and we're all just waiting for them now to come out. All of the media here in this staging area, where we are told they want all of the information to be relayed here instead of there at the scene for whatever reason. We see now one of Sylvester Turner's press communications officers out here, so we believe that he will be out here shortly. But there are a lot of questions. There are some answers, but as is usually the case when these press conferences happened, things are cleared up, the dots are connected, and we understand more about exactly what happened.
That was Jacob Rascon, who is there at Herman Hospital, Memorial Hermann Hospital in the Texas Medical Center, as we await the news conference. I believe I see.
I thought I saw the police chief.
I think so. He's come out into the lobby there of the hospital. He'll have to make his way across the street along with the mayor.
There they are.
And they will let us know what they know about these officers' condition, aside from the fact that, as we've been told, 2 are in critical condition, as you see on your screen here, and 3 in stable condition. We hope that they have encouraging news about the prognosis for these officers, and some information about their families, who our understanding is have been brought to the hospital in some cases by other police officers. But they seem to be huddling there, Dominique, there in the lobby of the hospital before they make their way out to the door. And it looks like they're starting to head that way now.
Yes, they need to cross the street. The podium for the news conference is set up across the street from the hospital. So we're going to keep our camera poised on the police chief and the mayor, so we'll be able to know when they're leaving that area and crossing the street to begin the news conference, which was scheduled to begin at 7:30 this evening. So they're a few minutes behind schedule, but understandable, because they needed to talk with medical personnel, they needed to talk with family and each other to be cohesive in the message that they communicate with us, with the media, and therefore to you, the viewer. What you see on the right-hand side of your screen is our Sky 2 camera. It is over the scene. We were happy to report that the scene is secure. So the public is now being allowed back in. The suspect that they were reportedly dealing with in that house, we don't know what happened to that suspect. That's one of the questions we hope to have answered, because we were told there were 3 suspects in all, 2 of whom are dead. So we need to know what happened to that 3rd person in the house. Now, the reporting that we heard was that a life flight helicopter left the scene, which, if that's the case, and if it is carrying somebody, would be making it over to Memorial Hermann shortly. So the scene is on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side is Memorial Hermann Hospital, where we are awaiting the news conference to find out who was involved in this shooting, what this was about. We do know so far that a warrant was being served, or warrants, by the gang task force on the southeast side of town. That was the start of the story. And now we have 5 officers who were shot at one scene and being treated for their wounds.
We're just told, Dee, that the mayor and the police chief are getting one final briefing from the hospital medical personnel before they come out and tell the public through us what has transpired here. I think it looks like they're just about wrapping that up so that they can make their way across the street to where they've asked reporters to gather for the dissemination of this incredibly important information to all of us in Houston, because 5 of our officers have been wounded in a shootout with really bad actors in Southeast Houston who tried to kill 5 police officers. Here they're coming across the street now, and we'll be able to hear exactly how our officers are doing right now.
What an incredibly difficult day for Houston's police chief.
For all of us, really.
For everybody to get this word, to have to process what has taken place here today, to have to deal with panicked family members wondering if their loved one is going to be okay, to the other brothers and sisters in blue worried about their colleagues. An incredibly tough day here in the city of Houston, and we are about ready to learn the extent of what took place today, who's behind it, most importantly, who is injured and who we can pray for.
Thank you all for your patience. First and foremost, I want to just say right off the bat that no officer has died, and folks are trying to start those rumors, so I want to say that right off the bat. Before I make some specific comments on what occurred tonight, Mayor Turner and the council members here, Mayor Turner will open up the briefing. Mayor?
Let me just start off by saying that this has been a tough day for our city. But I certainly want to encourage all Houstonians to pray for all of our police officers who are at Memorial Hermann. This is one of the finest hospitals you will find anywhere in the country, and they are being attended to with the best medical care. So pray for all of our police officers. I will tell you, one of them is either will be discharged if it has not already been. That's good news. And for the others who will be remaining here at the hospital, pray for them, and pray for their families. Pray for their spouses, their children, their parents, all of their loved ones, and there are many loved ones that are on the road, en route here. So pray for those who will be flying from outside of the state, and pray for those who are on the road driving in. That's important. Let me also thank EMS and the fire department for the work that they did in getting all of them here to this hospital in very quick time. Let me tell you, let me commend EMS, Chief Pena, the fire department, all of them who responded to our police officers in their moment of need. And got them here in very fast time so that they could be attended to. I want to thank the Houston Police Department and others for clearing the roadway, for clearing the freeway, so that they could bring them, get them here so they could get the care that they desperately needed in a very quick fashion. And then I just want to thank all of Houston for just offering their prayers. Let me just say this. Our job is to keep people safe in our city. And I want to be very clear, is that, we do not tolerate any sort of activity, whether it's drug activity, drug trafficking, whether it's whatever it may be. We don't tolerate it in our city. That we want to work night and day to make sure that our city remains safe, We don't want anyone injured in any manner, whether it's a person that's on the street or whether it's a police officer, whether it's a firefighter, a first responder, whoever it might be. And so I'm just very grateful and thankful for everyone who's come together in this moment. I want to thank the members of City Council who are here standing as well tonight, who have left their offices or their homes to be here. I want to say a special thanks to each one of the City Council members. I want to say a special thanks for Tiffany Fatita, who's here to stand and to be at this hospital, continuing to pray for all the police officers. And I want to thank all of you for the coverage that you have provided. But and the medical staff. I really want to thank the medical staff here at Herman Memorial. They are just incredible, and they are giving some fantastic care to these police officers. So, Chief, let me turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for always, one of the calls you never want to get as a chief is you've had officers shot, and one of the calls you never want to make to a mayor, to a family member, is that officers have been hurt. So I'm going to go over the incident real quick, and we've had a second officer involved shooting in Northside, and I don't know if you guys want to hear about that or not, but I want to focus initially on this first shooting. So at about 4:15 p.m., a narcotics group 15 from the Houston Police Department, who was working an investigation involving the sales of narcotics out of a residence in the 7800 block of Hardy Street, responded to Hardy Street as a team of about a dozen narcotics officers and about a half a dozen patrol officers from the Eastside Division. The patrol officers were there to provide support and obviously to provide the uniform presence for this operation. Shortly before 5 o'clock, the narcotics officers attempted to serve a search warrant on the location at 7800 Hardy Street. They announced themselves as Houston police officers while simultaneously breaching the front door of the residence. And while the police car, the marked police unit with uniform members as well as the police officers or the police garb also hit the siren to make sure everybody can and hit the lights so they knew that police officers were there. Immediately upon breaching the door, the officers came under fire from one or two suspects inside the house. We're not sure how many of the suspects fired at this time. As you can imagine, it was a pretty chaotic scene over there, and the investigation's unfolding. As a result of the exchange of gunfire between our officers and one or two suspects, we have 5 officers injured. 4 were struck by gunfire. 2 officers are currently in surgery. They're in surgery for gunfire sustained, and they are in critical but stable condition. And we're hopeful that with the prayers of this community that they will recover. But again, they are in critical condition but stable. Their families are here. Some of the families are in transit, but 2 officers are currently in surgery. 2 other officers were shot, and they will remain hospitalized for observation for at least a 24-hour period. They were struck by gunfire, but they are basically ambulatory, and they're expected to make a full recovery. 1 officer sustained an injury during the gun battle. It's important to note that once the officers, the initial indications are once the officers breached the door and the gunfire began from the suspects. One of the suspects actually retreated momentarily to the back of the room, and then that suspect came back and again engaged the officers and gunfire. I have not been able to determine how many officers are shot, have returned fire. That's part of the ongoing investigation. As you can imagine, we needed to work the scene from a tactical perspective. SWAT responded along with other allied agencies. We established a pretty hard perimeter, and once you had 5 officers injured, 4 shot, 5 believed to be shot at the time, we had to slow down and actually turn it into a very methodical, tactical operation. The SWAT operators, upon taking control of the scene, utilized 2 different robots to go into the residence and to actually help search the residence. 2 suspects were struck by return gunfire by members of the Houston Police Department. Those suspects, once we were able to render the scene safe by SWAT, were pronounced deceased at the scene from the return gunfire from the officers. I want to personally thank the Houston Fire Department. They're phenomenal partners. the care and the concern and the love that they showed and displayed for our officers and their families was second to none. Chief Pena runs a world-class organization, and I also personally want to thank, on behalf of all the men and women of the Houston Police Department, the staff that you see behind it. We are so blessed to live in a city with medical facilities that people from around the world that of well means come here because they know that these hospitals, this institution of hospitals, are really second to none. I really believe as a result of their excellence, our officers can be in better hands. I also want to thank Lifelight, and I'll call Chief Pena here in a minute to update you on who was how many were transported by Lifelight and by ground. And I also want to thank our members of the Houston Police Department. It's important to note that this investigation began. And I was talking to the council members and Stardig and Gallegos and Dwight Boykins and the mayor that they receive emails. We receive emails. We receive complaints. Our eyes and ears are truly the community that we serve. We could not do what we do without the community we serve. This all began because a neighbor had the courage to say, we're not going to put up. We think that they're dealing dope out of this house. And we don't just ignore that. We immediately passed that on to our narcotics division that began this investigation, was able to actually determine that narcotics dealing, street-level narcotics dealing, black tar heroin was being dealt out of this, and we know the poison that's killing so many kids, not only here in Houston, but around the country. They immediately started an investigation, and that's what they were there tonight. They were there to execute a search warrant, and unfortunately, as we know, ironically, the mayor and I had our press conference today, and Tillman Fertitta, the chairman of the Police Foundation, Houston Police Foundation, we were celebrating two things today. One, at the Houston Police Academy, we're celebrating the groundbreaking. He's right behind me there. He's being shy. The groundbreaking of a tactical village that, again, is the result of a $10 million investment by the people of this community and their police department that tells you the kind of support we have. And two, we were there to celebrate the fact that despite the fact that this police department in 2019 has 300 fewer officers than we had 20 years ago, about 500,000 more people, our men and women, we said it then and we'll say it again, they don't make excuses, they make a difference. And what you saw today with these officers showing that they have the courage, the guts, and the perseverance to do what they need to do to keep this community safe. And so with that, I'll come back and answer questions of the mayor, more questions on the actual incident, and do some Spanish. But I'd like Chief Pena, who's not only a colleague, he's a dear friend, to come up and talk a little bit about the outstanding work of his men and women.
Good evening. This is a tough day for the Houston Fire Department and the city of Houston. I think, we need to ensure that we keep these officers that were injured here tonight in our prayers and their families. There's some real evil in this world, and I think today was evident, this incident was evident as far as the dangers that our first responders face each and every day out here in the streets. Couldn't be prouder of the work that the Houston Fire Department did. We were on scene in support of the Houston police officers' operation. It was the incredible work and quick work of our medic units that gave these officers, these injured officers, the best chance of survival in bringing them here to this world-class facility. I do want to make special mention Medic 18, Medic 19, and Ambulance 19 and their crews here tonight on C shift, who did an outstanding job of ensuring that the injured officers were provided with the critical care that they needed, as well as the other units on scene that were there to evacuate the patients onto life flight. So we had 3 injured officers that were transported by ambulance here to Herman Memorial, and 2 that were life flighted from the scene. All of them receiving advanced life support and advanced life care throughout transport. We got them to the hospital in critical but stable condition. And again, we're praying for these officers to pull through, and can't say enough about the work that the Houston police officers and the Houston Police Department do each and every day, as well as the Houston Fire Department, and the incredible support that we provide for each other. So with that, we'll be available for any questions.
Chief, before you go on, well, hold on. Let me just acknowledge the fact that Governor Abbott did call had a chance to talk to him and expressed his concern for all of these officers and their families, and wanted me to let you know that he's certainly sending forth his prayers on behalf of these officers as well as their families. So I did want to make that note.
Chief, the two officers in critical, where are they wounded?
Say again?
The two officers.
They both were struck in the neck area by gunfire.
Did they make it inside the house?
You know what? That's part of the investigation. We know that they breached and they came under fire right away. Let me just say that to the media real quick. I just got reports a minute ago that somebody's already found the house of one of these officers and showed up. That is irresponsible. These are narcotics officers that work undercover. They do not need the media out in front of their house. So it's not helpful, and I don't think it's appropriate. So if you're that station, whoever you were, please don't just get out of that area. These guys all work undercover. Let me just give you a quick overview of who got shot in terms of ages. And one of the individuals struck was of age 50. He's a sergeant. He was transported by ambulance. Another one of our male sergeants by the name of, I'm not going to give it up because I don't think we've made all the notifications. Age 50 was life flighted. Another senior police officer, age 54, and I can tell you this is the case agent. And let me tell you why I think these cops are heroes. This officer's been shot several times in line of duty. And while most people would call it a day after being shot and surviving, this man is 54 years old. He's the case agent on this case, and he was there in the front lines. If that doesn't tell you about the heart of the men and women we have the privilege to lead, I don't know what will. He's 54, and he's been on since 1984. The first one since 1993, the second one since 1991. The other officer that was life flighted, the 54-year-old and the 40-year-old, those two are in surgery. He was actually life flighted as well. And the last one is 33, and he's transported by ambulance. The officers that returned fire at the scene are being debriefed by the Special Investigations Unit, by Internal Affairs. The Harris County District Attorney's Office is on scene at the officer-involved shooting, and they will be working with us, the Civil Rights Division, to ensure that all policies, procedures, and law were followed. With that, I'm going to let Joe Gamaldi, who's in times like this, sometimes what we can't do, the Houston Police Officers Union do a phenomenal job of being partners with us, and I'd like to have him say a couple of comments on behalf of the Police Officers Union.
Yeah, first of all, let me just thank the community. The outpouring of support has once been amazing, and it shows why Houston's the greatest city in the world. I want to thank Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who already contacted us to make sure these officers are doing all right. And I want to thank all of our partners at HFD, all the officers out on that scene, who all played a crucial role in getting them down here. And certainly thank you to the medical staff, the world-class medical staff here that are taking care of our officers. But now I want to speak on behalf of the 5,200 brave men and women of the Houston Police Department and the other 800,000 police officers that are working these streets every single day, putting their lives on the line. We are sick and tired of having targets on our back. We are sick and tired of having dirtbags trying to take our lives when all we're trying to do is protect this community and protect our families. Enough is enough. And if you're the ones that are out there spreading the rhetoric that police officers are the enemy, well, just know we've all got your number now. We're going to be keeping track of all of y'all, and we're going to make sure that we hold you accountable every time you stir the pot on our police officers. We've had enough, folks. We're out there doing our jobs every day, putting our lives on the line for our families. Enough is enough. Now, please, keep these officers in your prayers.
Thanks, Joe. Mayor, you have anything? We'll open it up to questions, or I can do Spanish real quick.
2 suspects
questions
total, or 3 suspects?
There are 2 suspects that were shot and returned gunfire, and were they pronounced at the scene.
What kind of weapons?
2 suspects. Semi-automatic is all I have. I don't have anything other than semi-automatic.
Tell us about those suspects. They're back.
I can't tell you anything other than I know that because we had a search warrant that narcotics activity was going on in that residence, specifically the sale of black tar heroin.
Is there gang activity related as well?
We don't. That's part of the investigation.
You said one officer was not shot.
Semi-automatic pistols. One officer, out of the 5 officers, 4 were shot, 2 critically that are in surgery, both shot in the neck. But they're stable, thank God. The mayor and I talked to the surgeon on the way out, and one was an injury that's not from gunfire.
What kind of injury?
It's a knee injury. When you're getting shot, people are moving in all kinds of directions. And when there's a lot of shots being fired at you, and you get 4 officers shot, 5 officers shot. That's a lot of gunfire that came our way.
Do you know if any of the officers were injured by friendly fire?
No, I mean, let me just say this right off the bat. We don't suspect anybody being struck by friendly fire. I don't expect, because our people are really well trained. Even though in these very dynamic situations that certainly can happen. But if an officer was shot by friendly fire, the only people responsible under the law and morally are the people inside that residence that decided to take shots at police officers executing a lawful search warrant. What else?
¿Cuál es la situación en ese momento en esa comunidad que es altamente hispana? ¿Qué mensaje tienen para la gente ahí y sobre el estado de salud de los?
Bueno, la comunidad hispana, queremos que sepan que tenemos un gran orgullo, que la comunidad vio que había... pensaban que estaban vendiendo drogas en esta casa en la calle que le dije hace un ratico. La comunidad tuvo el coraje para decirnos, por favor, no queremos esta actividad en nuestra comunidad.
As Police Chief Art Acevedo now addressing the Spanish-speaking community through the Spanish-speaking media outlets there.
So much we have learned from this news conference. We will gather all of that information, compile it for you at 10 o'clock. But as we wrap this up, we want to talk to our reporters on scene. Jacob Rascone is there at Memorial Hermann right now. Jacob?
Yeah, Dominique and Bill, we're just going to turn it around because he's also giving the press conference in Spanish just to say, a lot of this turned out as we suspected. These narcotics officers, many of whom work undercover, were responding to a suspected drug house. Black tar heroin suspected to be involved. Immediately when they knocked on the door to serve the search warrant, and also 6 additional officers from the Eastside Division were there. Immediately when they knocked on the door, people inside fired on them, we're told. 2 of the officers shot in the neck, 2 additional officers shot in the extremities, and then a 5th had a knee injury. So the mayor and the police chief asking for prayers for the 2 injured officers who are in surgery and are critical, but we're told thankfully are in stable condition. And then one of the officers, we're told, is well enough that he may be able to get out of the hospital today. But that is the latest information from here. Of course, we'll wrap it all up tonight at 10 o'clock. Bill and Dominique.
All right, Jacob, thank you so much. So the Houston Police Department now in investigation mode, having left the response mode. Robert Arnold on the scene right now. Robert?
Yes, we've seen quite a few of the SWAT vehicles and other heavily armored vehicles move out of the area. They've also dropped a lot of the barricades around the streets. However, they are still keeping a tight perimeter around that 1 block area where the house is, because now what we're seeing move in as the SWAT officers and other tactical officers moved out are crime scene investigators from the Houston Forensic Science Center. We've seen prosecutors with the district attorney's office, as well as Houston police homicide investigators and members of what's called HPD's shooting team. They're all going to start going in now and investigating the exact circumstances surrounding these shootings here, not just for the case involving this, but also for training purposes. Anytime you have something of this magnitude, HPD always looks to see if there are ways that other officers can learn from this. So that's why you have investigators in there now alongside those prosecutors, as well as those crime scene investigators going through. We also saw ATF agents out here. This is very common now. ATF agents will look at the guns, run traces on the guns, run traces on the bullets to see if possibly there's any connection to other crimes. So there is still going to be a long night ahead for investigators who are out here trying to piece all of this together. Reporting live from Southeast Houston, Robert Arnold, KPRC, Channel 2 News.
Thank you, Robert. Our first reporter on the scene, Sally Mamdouh, will be our last as we wrap up our coverage for now. Sally?
Dominique, very busy scene still, despite the fact that they've secured the original scene where the shooting happened. But as you can see, a lot of people having to reroute. A lot of people that live in this neighborhood are having to reroute. We've seen officers block the street now, the intersection by Harding and Berkeley Street, as several crime scene vans we're seeing just driving into this area. This is going to be, it's going to take a couple of hours out here. Going to be a lot of officers and detectives coming to the scene to investigate the scene. But as you can see, people are trying to get to their homes after being evacuated for a couple of hours. But right now, we can't get closer to the scene yet. We're still kept at a distance. Right now, it's very busy. You have detectives leaving and coming from the scene. Certainly going to spend the next couple of hours here looking and combing through this the scene where a shooting happened. Back to you.
All right, Sally Mamdouh. completing our round robin of reporters out there. We're going to leave you with just a couple of final notes. One of them is this. The police chief made mention of the fact that some news organization had enterprised the address of one of the undercover narcotics officers who was wounded in this attack today and had gone to their home. That is something we would never do. It was not us. Just want to let you know that.
We also want to let you know that at this moment, 2 officers are in surgery. They are in critical condition. The mayor of Houston has asked for prayers for them, for the family members who are making their way to the hospital right now. These officers were shot in the neck area. They are in critical condition, but they are stable, and thankfully they are in the hands of the skilled surgeons at Memorial Hermann tonight.
That is great news. And we are, of course, wrapping all this up for you and bringing it to you in one serving tonight on our newscast at 10 o'clock.
Meantime, the news conference is continuing right now on click2houston.com if you would like to see that. We will get to work in the newsroom, and we'll bring all of this to you tonight on our news at 10 o'clock.
See you at 10.
This has been a breaking news alert from KPRC Channel 2. For continuing coverage, log on to click2houston.com.
Drug rips or people fighting over gang territory. And so those are the 3 drivers, and so that's why we keep fighting. Okay, thanks everybody. We'll have an update tomorrow, probably about 10 a.m. Thank you everybody for your patience.
Overnight, where they shot?
Say again?
The 2 being hospitalized overnight, where are they shot?
You know what, I don't remember, but they're ambulatory. I think one was in the shoulder. So thanks everybody, appreciate you all.
Do you have your mic?